You're listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.
Sergeant Bryan Washko, welcome back.
I'm back. It's been a long 2 years.
We
need to not have such a long gap in between. So much has happened since we've spoken last.
It seems like especially getting closer to the election, news and information coming in, just all of a sudden it's on a highway and it's just burning down the road, and there's so much coming in. There's so many things happening. I can't imagine you guys are couldn't be any more busier than probably what you are now.
It's like I said, I'm going on my 27th year
really?
in law enforcement. Yeah, I'm getting old. I'm getting close to retiring, and a few more, I hope, God willing. But no, the world is on fire. We all know this. Anybody who's informed, who's just has their ear to the ground and talking to people, that things going on in our society today is unimaginable. Yeah. And I know we'll talk about all these things today, but we go down these rabbit holes on what's going on in the world, and it's like, man, if you'd have said this 5 years ago, I'd have thought you're laughing, or this is like a Saturday Night Live skit going on, but it's real life, right? And everybody's affected. So, but yeah, but we still got to do our thing out there, and it is a election year. We're 32 days? Yeah. 31? Month away?
Actually a month, yeah.
A month away from
5th today.
One of the biggest elections ever. And it's exciting. It's exciting times, but it's scary times. I mean, we always talked about, JFK assassination, Ronald Reagan assassination attempts, and thought, man, that's never going to happen again. Growing up, we'd never had that happen until recently. Yeah. And two attempts in the last few months.
Right.
Between our open borders and, we lost a trooper this last week, nearly two of them.
What was his name?
It was Kevin Ramirez Vasquez.
Okay.
And he was out of Odessa working a crash scene, and somebody barreled through the crash scene and hit him. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries this week, and they laid him to rest on Thursday. And 2 days after he was hit, down in Houston, a trooper was on a traffic stop, and a car as a drunk driver, hit him, and he had lots of injuries, but as of right now, he's still alive.
He's stable?
Looks like he's going to be stable and pull through, but good. Lots of broken bones, head injury. It was near death for him. But to think about Trooper Vasquez's family and, all of us that worked with him, I never didn't know him personally, but we wore the same uniform, we're on the same team, and the wildest part is he was a brand new trooper just a year on. He was prior military. He served not only just his country, but he went to serve the state of Texas, came on with DPS, was working a year. So you never know. It could be your first day on the job, your first year on the job, or like Trooper Tom Nipper, who was killed in 2017 in my area, he had 43 years in, and he was 8 months from retirement. So you never know. Every time you put this uniform on, you're out there on our highways. It's a dangerous place, and
are y'all finding that people I get that there's drunk driving and there's accidents that happen that way, but have y'all seen a decline or an increase in people using their cell phones as far as driving still, or has people kind of gotten the hint?
Yeah, we have. What's crazy is, before cell phones, I started policing in the 90s, and there was no such thing as cell phones. They had bag phones for people who are like realtors and doctors, had all the money, would do that, but we had pagers. But when cell phones started getting popular, when texting, I guess 2005, 6.
Yeah.
Then it became, but the old text, it took you like 3 days to send I'll be home soon, because you had to hit MMMLLL on those old Nokias. But and smartphones came out, and that's what our big push is. A lot of things I do is go to these high schools and these driver's ed courses, and I talk to these kids about, because the new drivers coming out right now, they've had a cell phone since they were 3-4 years old. I didn't get one until I was in my mid-20s because they didn't exist. Yeah. But now, trying to tell them to put that down and focus on driving, it's almost impossible, because that's to no fault of their own. That's all they've known. That's like another appendage. Yeah. They're on that thing constantly. So we're seeing a lot of young drivers, running into the backs of other vehicles and trucks, running off the road on a clear day on a straight road. They just zoom off the road because their head's down on that phone. And older drivers still, it is a big problem. We've seen on the other spectrum, talking about DWIs, I was actually had a conversation with a trooper yesterday at the office about this. It's harder to find a DWI. They're still out there, but they were a dime a dozen in the old days. Sure. You can just go out there and you could find 2 or 3 a night if you wanted to on the weekend. But what we're finding now, and what he's finding now, is you stop a car for a minor traffic violation, we're out there, anything after 9 o'clock on the weekend, the potential for someone to be impaired is greater than any other time. So we're out there, especially on weekends, looking for those drunk drivers. We're stopping cars for taillights, slightly speeding over the limit, little violations where you look for these drunk drivers, get your probable cause. And we're finding lots of drunks, but guess what? They're in the passenger seat or in the back, and they have a sober driver. A lot of times it's an Uber or
really?
Lyft. Or a designated driver. And that's what we want to see. We don't want to give DWIs. We have to when we find them, because we have to save their life and the people that they potentially could hit. So and this is what I was telling that trooper yesterday. I said, I remember in the Bell County area, we have Fort Hood and Fort Cavazos now, but all soldiers love to go to Austin on the weekends. It's an hour away, and they deserve to have fun. They serve in our country. They can do what they want in my book, as long as they do it safe. We would find a car speeding, coming back like at 2 a.m. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's a drunk. Get him stopped. It's usually a guy in an Army PT shirt and shorts, half asleep, with a carload of drunk buddies.
Oh, really?
And I sit there and poke my head, and you could smell the alcohol coming out. And they're like, yeah, these are my battle buddies. They call me because the designated driver they had got drunk. Yeah. And that's the thing we tell people. When you're a designated driver, don't touch one beer or alcohol to your lips, because that one is going to turn into 7 and into 15. Next, nobody's. Right. They're picking the person, the last one standing, or the least drunkest, and that's not how it works. So I was telling him, I said, and I know other troopers have experienced this, and officers as well, and I said, I don't care how fast they were going, as long as they were doing the right thing. I'm not going to write them a ticket. I'll be pretty stern with them, say, hey, you need to slow down. I know you got a bunch of loud drunks in your car, but you guys did the right thing, and we thank you for that, for saving their lives and somebody else's. It could have been me that nearly got hit on a traffic stop if one of those drunk guys got behind the wheel. Yeah. So I always give them a warning for that, and let them know just to slow down and get them home safe. So you don't want them to punish them for doing the right thing.
Even in my very small circle, I've noticed that when it comes to going and having a good time, going out for drinks or something, the conversation does come around to getting an Uber driver, and it's gotten so, I guess it's become such a big part of just society that everybody's got it on their phone. Everybody typically has a smartphone.
Since 2014, I think, is when Uber came out, and it's done such a great. It's saved countless amount of lives. Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, and looking at how there's times where we go out and we stop 20, 30 cars on a Friday, and you find no drunks. That was almost impossible to do 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
That's actually impressive.
It is. It's great, and that's what we want to see. And just the education of bringing awareness out there to the people that. There's this is what's always find not comical, but I always found fascinating when we arrest a drunk and we're waiting on a tow truck. The drunk's usually cooperative, they're drunk and they're just talking. A lot of times they just talk, or sometimes like, I don't want to go to jail. Next they're telling their life story. Next they're laughing because their emotions are all over the place. Sure. But when that tow truck shows up, you talk about somebody getting pissed off, because guess what? That's $200-$300 they got to get their car back. Oh, yeah. But not realizing that DWI, the first offense, is going to cost you nowadays about $14,000 to $15,000. Yeah. So they don't even realize they're grasping that, for one, because they're impaired, or it's frustrating is how many times when I've arrested somebody for DWI and we're waiting on the tow truck and they're like, man, can I call so-and-so to get my car? Can I call my wife? Can I call this person? Can I call that person? They list like 5-6 people they could call. I'm like, dude, why the hell didn't you call them 30 minutes ago to get you? And I said, we wouldn't be in this position. You wouldn't be going to jail. Yeah. And but there are options out there, and I can't think of one friend or loved one. I don't care if somebody called me at 2, 3 in the morning and I had to go get them. I would go get them, because it's the right thing to do. You may be inconvenienced or frustrated, but they may owe you a steak dinner somewhere down the road. but you're saving their life ultimately.
Yeah, it's. I don't know if it was you guys or who it was, but years ago there was a billboard that would say, DWI, you can't afford it. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I know a couple of people who've had them. And in those experiences that I've paid attention to the things that they went through, you can't afford it. No. Some of them were $15,000 in court fees and fines and lawyers and, 3 to 4 years of a process. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because one in particular, I think, was on probation afterwards. But it was funny because... and I say funny because lack of a better word, but it was essentially being on probation for 3 years up to your court date,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so, and in addition to that, and then it was the probation afterwards. But it was like, it's classes, it's courses. It's
and to renew your license is $1,000. But think of this. Think of that. We talk about a monetary punishment. Think about, and I'm telling you, 90% of the people I've arrested for DWIs had no criminal records. They've never stolen anything, never written a hot check. They're some of the nicest people ever. They just made a poor choice.
Sure.
I mean, heck, I don't mind drinking a beer or margarita, but I'm damn sure not going to get behind the wheel.
Yeah.
You know, and but think about going out, drinking and driving, thinking, and that's the thing. Everybody thinks they feel good because they feel good because they've been drinking. So think about leaving wherever you're going, trying to get home. You look down, you're swerving, whatever, and you hit and kill somebody.
Right.
So now you've killed somebody, and you're looking at going to prison. For somebody who's never broken a law, now you're going to prison, and you just took somebody's life.
Right.
And I remember showing up in many crashes, and it's a fatality crash, and I'm thinking, damn, I wish I was here to prevent this because I just drove through here 30 minutes ago. And then you talk to the drunk who hit them, and they're like, it hasn't set in, or they're in shock knowing that they took a life. It's like you can't reverse that. And it was such an easy decision to not get behind the wheel, you know, and it's so preventable.
And it's not just a matter of an impact on the life that hit the person and the person who passed, but you got to think about, you know, wives and husbands and children and family members.
And you're not a killer, but you just killed somebody.
Right.
And you know, it was a huge, huge mistake that you'll never be able to undo. You have to live with the rest of your life. And but yeah, that's I've seen that so many times, countless amount of times. And I wish we can. That's probably one of the best educational tools is, you know, somebody who's a habitual drinking and DWI driver, to take them and say, hey, look, I know you like your good time, Charlie, you like to have fun, but let me take you on my next death notification for somebody who's doing what you're doing. I'm going to get your butt up at 2 a.m. You're going to ride with me. We're going to go to that person's house, the wife or the mother or the parent or the husband, and you're going to say, can we come in because we need to talk? There's been a crash and somebody's dead.
Yeah.
And you watch somebody soul leave their body just because they've getting this horrible, horrible news. I mean, nobody's immune to it. It can happen to me, somebody that I love. It can happen to you, anybody. And God forbid it ever happens, but it happens every single day. We average about 12 fatalities a day in Texas now.
Really?
We're at 30 million people plus. You know, I always tell people in 1980 it was 9.5 million people. Look how many more people that is. That's 20 million more. And the odds of having more crashes are out there because of the distraction. I mean, technology and roadways have gotten safer with cars, with crush technology on vehicles crashing and people wearing their seatbelt. We're up to over 90% rate of people wearing their seatbelts.
Oh, wow.
And that's great because it used to be like 30% back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So that's helping out a lot. But, you know, we talk about the distracted driving, these stupid cell phones, as great as they are, making our lives easier. But, man, it's one of the biggest killers out there. It's actually proven to be worse than drunk driving.
Let me ask you this. I got a buddy who has a brand new, beautiful 3500 Dodge Dually.
I just got one of those.
I saw
You're
yours
describing
too.
mine.
You probably had the same truck.
It's a gray. It's a month old. I
think
love it.
his is great too.
Yeah.
But they're starting to come with this screen that's the size of your laptop.
12-inch screen. I have it. Yeah.
How's that different from a cell phone?
Well, you know, everywhere I go, and it's weird, even coming down here, of course, I've been here in 2 years, so I had to get the directions. But if my wife and I are traveling, we always, if it's more than 10, 15 minutes, I type it in. Like every day I go to the gym, I put it in because there's so many crashes. It could tell you to detour and bypass it. So that's why I put it in. It's not like I'm lost and don't know where I'm going. I like to know what lies ahead.
Right.
So I don't rely on it much, but it's right there, and I'll put it in, but I don't like stare at it. I just use it.
They come with apps too now, don't they? Like
you could put your music and everything in, but you know, and that's what, you know, there's laws against texting and driving, receiving a text, but there's no law against picking up my phone, typing in the directions to this place and looking down. Which one's going to kill you worse? They're both the same. They're equally the same. So the problem law enforcement has, and I'm sure all you listeners will be like, yeah, next time I get stopped, if I was texting, I'm just going to say I was putting in my GPS or changing a song on my iPod. And but yeah, we have to, you know, we're not going to grab your phone and look through it, but it happens almost every day. I'm going down the interstate and the car in front of me starts swerving left and right within their lane. You see people's heads going down. They're looking at their phone.
Sure.
You know, it's very dangerous because the average text is about 5 seconds long. and at 70 miles an hour, you traveled nearly 2 football fields with your eyes closed. If you
Really?
look down for 5 seconds at 75 miles an hour, that's over 200 yards.
Really?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
it's you don't realize what could run out in front of you. I mean, I've had some near crashes in my new truck. This person just started swerving over in my lane, and I'm like, no, and it's like, it's brand new. Don't wreck my truck. But if I wasn't paying attention, I wouldn't have seen it.
Well,
so I'm always looking.
There's a lot of people that'll sit there and go, okay, well, what's the technicality here? And it's like, okay, well, you know what, an accident or a wreck or running off the road doesn't care about the technicality.
Yeah.
Doesn't care if it was a text, or doesn't care if you were pulling up something new on Spotify. It doesn't make a difference. The action or the impact that happens at the end of an accident like that, it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter if you were texting or what you're doing. And I see those big screens, and I often wonder about it, because there's ways to swipe, there's ways to click on things.
Oh, it has
very
a thing.
distracting.
If I were to try to, you mentioned that with the apps and everything. If the truck's in motion, even if I wanted to pull up, I can hit the button on the steering wheel, say call so-and-so, and it'll go through my thing. But if I try to physically go in there and type in a direction, it won't. It says not when vehicle's in motion. Just realize that unless you're doing 0 miles an hour, you can't type in a destination. You can't look up a phone number. You can't do anything on that map.
So it minimizes the things you can do.
It is a safety feature on that. So that is a good thing. They have apps for cell phones like that. It's like when my son, we'll talk about my son, what he's doing now, because last time I was here, he was in the Army.
Yeah, but he's a law enforcement, right?
He got married a year ago this week and got out of the Army last January. And in February this year, he was sitting in the police academy and graduated in May. He's in Nash County. So he planted roots in North Carolina. They're kind of the central northern part. Didn't get affected by the big mess that's going on. They got a lot of rain, but they were fortunate not to sustain like what the west side has. And but he's loving it. I told him to be a fireman, but he don't listen. And that's just it. It unlocks a new fear.
Yeah.
It unlocked this new fear, because now my son, who I've known since birth, is now going to have to see and deal with the stresses of some of the things I've seen. Because I never came home and talked to him about the body bags, how the white ones are for the little kids and the big ones are for the adults, and we strap them together on a gurney. I don't tell them those kind of details, because that's horrific, and I don't tell it to anybody. But now he's going to have to deal with that. He's already been to a couple of shooting calls. 2 guys in his department have been to shooting since he's been on the road. And he just got out on his own, got a field training a couple weeks ago. And it's just like, man, don't take any unnecessary risks. Always mind your safety and be careful, because it's a different world. They're crazy.
Yeah.
And there's some craziness out there. So it's very dangerous. But
there's a we talked about law enforcement earlier, and how dangerous of a job it is, and how we've come to this point where, I don't know if it's just been over the last several years or maybe it's been decades, but we've been gradually merging into this area where there's been less and less respect for people in general, but especially law enforcement. And it's like, even just wearing that uniform, to some people is a target, and they don't need to know, nothing bad has to happen. There doesn't have to be a stop, but just wearing the uniform in some places, you talked about the one here in Texas, and I think in San Antonio, and then, years back, maybe around the same time that you were here previously, those 2 law enforcement officers in California, they got shot just sitting in their car. Yeah. And it's like, it's very scary, so God bless him, and I'm thankful for guys like you and guys like him, because it's the shepherd, right? It's the sheepdog, protecting the flock type thing, and it really is something where we have to have people like that. I feel like in this society we've kind of like disincentivized young men to have that kind of spirit and that kind of heart, but they still exist, and
you look back when the George Floyd thing happened, that set us back years, because in the 70s there's a big racial thing with police, and there was a lot of corruption with police in the old days. There was bad tactics. People, it was not a good time. Not all police were bad then, but there was a lot of injustice going on. Sure. And some of the bigger cities, and you talked about the old school New York, NYPD, all these corruption deals are coming out in Houston, and it's like, man, that happened in the 60s and 70s. It was wild. But, things have gotten, I started in 1998, and I've never seen any issues. And what happened with the whole George Floyd thing is that was all about perspective. You know, we all know George Floyd died from overdose,
Sure.
but the way he was handled out there, that didn't look good. You know, for 8-9 minutes, however, with the man kneeling on him and 3 other officers staring, when you had all these civilians filming it, and that officer just looking at them, filming him, and the other 3 not doing anything, it looked bad. And he was in the car at one point, and George Floyd is like, he's a big old dude. He was 6'6", and, you know, they got him out of the car for whatever reason, said he couldn't breathe, laid him out. But then, you know, I had an old supervisor in the old days, and we'd arrest somebody, especially when you're in a bad neighborhood, and you get some commotion, you got somebody on the ground, you start getting people coming out of the woodworks, off the porches, and, you know, this is before cell phones, but they're coming out there, what the hell's going on, blah, blah, blah. Well, now he's like, hey, we're getting an audience, get his ass out of here. Yeah. Put him in the car and get him out of here. Because the more audience you get, your actor's going to put on a show. So-and-so may come out, and they've been drinking, and mom comes out, and what are you doing to my baby? So the quicker you get them out of there, the better. So what happened with George Floyd, they sat there for 8-9 minutes. I mean, there's 3 of those cops could have handled him. I mean, he's been dead weight, but they could have picked him up, stuffed him in the car, and took him to jail, and he'd have died in custody.
Well, at one point they had him in the car.
They did, and they got him out. Yeah. And then so what that did, and what the media loved about that video, because it was a white officer on a black man, that just fits their whole narrative that all white cops can't wait to get up and start shooting young black children. And that's what I see how we're portrayed, and it pisses any officer off or any civilian with a brain.
Sure. Because
that's not what we do. You know, we want to go our whole careers without shooting anybody.
Right.
Not saying we won't if we have to, but we do not want that to take a life. But we're prepared with firearms and everything. But even when officers do, I've worked with a lot of troopers that have. And up here, you're never prepared to take a life. You have to deal with that the rest of your life. One of my coworkers I recruited, he was at a local police department in where I was from, and he got into shooting, and I literally slid around the corner as he dropped the guy come at him with a knife. And, you know, and this was in 2012, and then he came on a DPS 2015. But, you know, as years gone on, I asked him how he was about it, and he said, man, some days are good, some days are bad, because he'll live with that forever. He took this man's life, although the man put him in that position. It was in front of the guy's family too. His whole family watched it happen, and the guy he was on drugs, had mental problems, but he was going to kill that officer if he didn't, and he had to do it. No one wants to be in that position. You know, you're not going to run around high five. Yeah, I killed somebody. Sure. I'm the hero. No, you had to do what you had to do. But going back, you know, like I said, I don't want to get off subject, but that whole thing was in Milwaukee where that happened. And look at the riots that happened, the billions of dollars in damage, the amount of life that was lost because of that incident. Other officers have been killed because of that. Innocent people were killed over that in all this protest and burning down cities. It was wild. Should have never happened. So, yeah, you had some bad policing going on. That officer should have never done that. The other 3 should not have allowed. He got charged for the murder, which, I mean, that's not what killed him. It was just bad policing, right, is what that was. But we ultimately know that the forensics was that, and the coroner said, yeah, it was, you know, drug overdose and had it in his system. But either way, you know, he didn't, that's not the way we do. But what that did was set, especially for the young generation who sees that, and then watching the news spew out all this garbage about it. And every time you see,
starts breeding that
shooting,
negative mentality, yeah.
You only see the white officers on the black suspect. You don't see the black officer shooting the white suspect, which happens all the time. Sure. But that never makes the news. So when you put one side on one and put that on the news every single day, say you're a 12, 13-year-old boy, young black boy watching that thinking, hell, I'm scared to death now of these police, because all they're doing is killing black men on TV, and that's not right. And the media, it's on the media's heads on that time.
And then they hear that rhetoric for the rest of their young life.
They do, and it's garbage. It's garbage. We're not here to do that, and it's shameful. So that's been now going on 5 years, and we're starting to slowly come out of that and put that behind us. But it takes one bad cop to ruin it for the rest of us. Yeah. It really does. And now you have people who like, man, I don't want to be a cop anymore. So now there's departments having to hire the ones they wouldn't have hired before, because all their good applicants are going out and doing other things for public service, whether it's nursing, doctors, or firefighting or something. If they're goal driven to serve their community, they're not putting on this uniform because they don't want to deal with all the garbage that's going on. So now they're hiring officers who probably should not be getting hired, but they need a warm body to fill that car and to go answer calls. So that's even going to set them back further, in my opinion, because that officer who doesn't need to be an officer is now going to mistreat people because they would not have been hired in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're dealing with now, I think. But our numbers are still
rough.
up there. You know, it is still an honorable job. And, you know, like I said, I knew when I was 11 I wanted to do this. I want to be a trooper. There's nothing else I wanted to do. And I know there's other young men and women out there that, especially the ones that go in the military, we love getting them right out of the military because they get to continue this service, not just to the country, but to their state now. And we're a paramilitary organization. We have rank, we have structure, and it is a great job. You have a lot of freedom. They give you a car, you go out and fight crime, you stop cars, and it's not all about ticket writing. That's not what we do. We put our drunks in jail, but when we're out there writing warnings for stuff, you're going beyond the stop. You're finding abducted children. You know, this human trafficking thing going on is outrageous. You know, I'm sure we'll touch on that on their open border, and we talk about that later. But you never know what the day's going to bring.
Yeah,
it could be a slow day, or it could be a holy crap day. I'm never going to forget this the rest of my life.
I'm sure wanting to lead your son to firefighting was, you know, it's maybe not as crazy, but I got a buddy who's a firefighter, and he's told me, he said, you know, I don't know if it's the lights. He says, I don't know if it's just the panic that's happening when there's an event. But he said there's been several times, he goes, we show up at a scene, and he likes to brag. You know, he says, we always get there before the PD does or law enforcement does. And he says, we get shot at. We get in fights.
They're in a uniform, so somebody who's not mentally there, they see a uniform, they see that as authority, and they're going to attack them. I mean,
that's wild.
These EMS and firemen are unarmed going to these things. That's why they call officers to show and clear the scene and secure it before they get there.
Yeah, it's wild.
So,
he had gotten in some trouble at one point because I think a guy attacked him and some of the other fellow firefighters. And we're having the same birthday, so we were talking one day over dinner. And he says, I'm not allowed to punch anybody anymore. I said, what are you talking about?
Why? You can't defend yourself? I mean, and that's the thing. If you're going to attack anybody, that you have the right to defend yourself. People forget about that because remember, when we were young, we're the same age, growing up in school, the kids would get in a fight, they both went to detention.
Yeah.
You could jump on a kid and they're not going to get the truth. They're just going to say, all right, y'all have been fighting at school. And what does that teach you?
Yeah.
That teaches you, like, hell, I'm going to lay there and be a victim. I'm going to get... It's like, no, if you get attacked, you defend yourself by any means.
You know, he was telling me, and you may know something about this more than I have because I hadn't really talked to him about it lately, but at some point they were talking about maybe doing, they were talking about trying to get the firefighters trained on weapons. Because apparently, I guess when there's a school shooting, they're not allowed to enter the school till law enforcement shows up. Yeah. So I want to say, and I don't know if it went through, but they were trying to push to have firefighters trained with weapons. That way, if they did show up before law enforcement did, they're still allowed to go in and secure an area while the other firefighters working on people. And it was to try and save time on being able to get to the wounded quicker or whatnot. I don't know where that ended up, but
you never know. I know they have tactical medics, I've heard, that have gone in on like SWAT raids. So if the bullets start flying, they could start putting tourniquets on officers or whoever. But yeah, that's interesting. But, you know, I don't know why they don't. I'm sure there's a reason, because you may have patients that are combative and stuff. The last thing you want to do is have a weapon right here accessible to them to grab, but maybe have one, the ambulance driver, someone that patient don't have access to, because, you know, there's a trooper that I've known for years. He was a Killeen fireman for like 18 years, and I recruited him, and he came over to our side, and I said, man, how did y'all do it going to some of those houses? He said, man, I'm lucky to be alive. He said, I've had guns pointed at us, you know, when we go to these calls, and not knowing it because people are just mentally unstable at some of these scenes. And so, I wouldn't want to do any part of that. But
I know we talked a little bit earlier about investigation still going out in Uvalde. What is some of the things that maybe, and we probably can't touch too much on that, but what are some of the things that maybe DPS or other law enforcement that you're aware of have kind of gone into? You know, we talked about lessons learned from something like that. Is there something different that's changed, or are there new trainings, or
we've always had our alert training, and that's where, you know, you're trained to go in, you know, especially after Columbine. I talked to you before we went on air about, I watched Columbine happen on live TV when I was a young cop in Killeen, and it was at April of 99. And it was so confusing. It was like, who would go and shoot up a school? They're not going to get anything. It's not a robbery. Kids don't have any money. But from that moment on, things have changed. In law enforcement, we always were trained, if there's a mass shooting, surround it, talk them out, and and let's try to get this calmed down. Where they're not going in there to shoot one person, then take hostages. They're in there to kill as many as they can. So we learned that game is a totally different game now. So we've learned to go in and, number one, stop the killing. You're jumping over people who are screaming for help, but if you don't stop that killer, you may have 5 or 6 here. You're going to have 20 more if you don't stop them. So whether you're the only officer or if you're going in as a pair or a group, but you got to go into the gunshots. And we saw that one in Nashville. That was great. That was the body cam was great footage. How those officers went in there and eliminated that threat immediately. And that's what that's what you're supposed to do. So I just came out of 2 weeks of that training here in San Antonio, and we do live drills. And the last one I went to was a single officer rapid deployment as a school shooting. Say it was in plain clothes. We wore plain clothes. We have our off-duty gun and our badge. And we go in there and handle the threat, and then we handle how to react when the police show up. Because when the police show up, see an armed person in plain clothes, and our badge we're holding like this, and it's this big. Those officers going in there are going to have adrenaline going, and we talked about how to identify yourself and everything. It's very hands-on training and since uvalde. Every officer in our department in the state's required to attend this, and so we don't let anything like that happen again. It can happen again.
I think we touched on it a little bit the first time, but let's say, you have training on this, showing up in plain clothes. Joe Blow off the street shows up, and he comes up on some sort of shooting or something, and there's so many concealed carry people now. My concern is always, okay, I'm a concealed carry guy. If, he show up, it's difficult for law enforcement to come to a chaotic scene and then determine, okay, this guy's the guy shooting up the place, and this guy who's dressed just like him is the concealed carry. As a just a regular member of the public, what is something, and it's never going to be perfect, but what is something they can do if they ever find themselves in that situation and law enforcement shows up? I mean, of course, put your gun down and lay down on the ground.
And comply until all the details are sorted out. But we even talked in this last class, if you're going in, get on 911, put it in your pocket, have an open line as you're going through. Tell them what you're wearing. Number one, I'm wearing a white T-shirt, blue jeans, got a ball cap on. I'm 6'5", white dude with a gun. I'm a concealed carry. I'm going in, and keep that open line so that those officers can get it, because you don't know. Because the officers, the cavalry's going to show up. Yeah. You don't know if that dispatch is going to get that immediately out or not. But yeah, it's a scenario it's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart. I hadn't thought about that.
And then after the threat's done, if you know there's no more, what do you put your gun down, your hands out? That's what I would probably do, because I know those 50 cops coming around the corner, they're going to be ready to shoot and stop this person with a gun, because they hear that the shooting's going on. And if I wasn't able to get to my phone or something and call, I'm just going to make sure that threat's no longer a threat. And you don't know if there's any more, if they're working in pairs or if they're working by themselves. Yeah. You don't know that. So do you want to put your gun down and not make sure this scene is safe? I don't know. There's really no right answer. It's just a holy crap moment for sure.
I like the idea of being keeping that line of communication with dispatch. I mean, I guess there's no, like you said, there's no perfect answer to it, because let's say you've got a situation like Uvalde, for example, and you've got a small community and a small dispatch office, and you've got 60 people calling in. That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, because if you have two, say, I don't know how many that communications have that. In a small town like that, they may have 2 or 3 dispatchers. When they get hundreds of calls, you're going to be put on hold. Yeah. But if you can get that initial call in and say, "Hey, there's a man just went in with a rifle. I'm going to go in," and give him your description and what you're wearing and what you're about to do. Yeah. So it's just that you hope it turns out for the best. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, a lot more people are, since that, they, as civilians, they say, "What would I do as a licensed carrier? How would I handle this? Am I going to make a good witness, or do I go in and take care of business?" So, and they're not required to. We are, but the civilian is not required to. There's not going to be any repercussions if they don't. But I think most people who are willing to carry a gun are going to accept the responsibility of carrying that gun, and you're going to want to defend that third person, especially if they're children.
And I think for a lot of folks, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think a lot of people who are concealed carry folks, they've had that conversation with themselves a long time ago, and you don't want to have that conversation in the middle of something happening.
Yeah.
So whether it's, hey, what am I carrying for? Am I carrying to be able to help defend against something like that? Am I carrying a lot of times? And I've had conversations with my wife. I'm like, if we go somewhere and we've got the gun on us, it's like, hey, I've got the gun here. We've got some magazines.
Have a plan,
here.
yeah. And if
we'll talk about it, and I'll tell her, you know what, we'll have a conversation and say if something happens, we're getting out of there. The gun is to get us out of the situation. Now if we find ourselves where we can't retreat, we can't get out of something, that's a different story. Yeah. But I always tell her, we stay together, and the gun is to get us out of here, not to go into something.
Exactly.
And vice versa. Let's say there's a different situation. I think having communication with your loved one, letting them know, hey, I'm armed today, just letting you know, here's where the gun is.
Especially if you got kids, think about it. I mean, what's a kid going to do? I know if my kid, my son that's a cop, when he was little, if something were to happen and I get up and confront somebody, what's that kid going to want to do? They're going to want to latch onto your side.
Sure.
So you need to get with your other half and say, hey, make sure if something happens, if I stand up and this gun comes out, y'all need to have an exit plan or get under the table, secure these kids so they don't come running out in the middle of this firefight. Because the kids are naturally going to flock to their mom or dad who has the gun because they're scared. And then if you're just there alone with your kids, they need to know that, hey, if I stand up and this gun comes out, you guys get under the table and call 911. Something that, you hate to have this conversation with your kids, but we did fire drills when we were kids. We never had school shootings. We never even fathomed the idea of somebody coming up in our school. Even in Killeen, Texas, as rough as it was, you can go to my elementary school in 1986, walk through the side door. It's wide open.
Yeah.
They only locked it at night. The janitor, when he or she left, at 7, 8 o'clock at night, they locked the building up. But once it was opened at 6 a.m. in the morning, every door on the school was wide open to the general public.
Yeah.
But nobody went in.
No, you're right. That's how it was.
It's creepy to think about that. It's like, man, that's wild. But I mean, we didn't have homeless guys or girls wandering through the halls or nothing. We never had a problem.
Yeah.
But every door was open.
Yeah.
So that tells you that society's changed. That's for sure.
Yeah.
In 30, 40 years, but unfortunately,
I feel like I think we're going through a lot of changes, and a lot of it is just what we've been experiencing with the border, for example. And when we first got together and we're talking, I think my big concern at the time was back in, I always refer to where I come from, where George West. They had multiple. I guess runaways or whatever, a bunch of guys in a truck hauling ass through town, running through ranch fences, and my bigger concern, and one thing we talked about previously was I felt like because of policies that were enacted or not being implemented, it starts to put John Q. Public in a position that they may not need to be in had those policies been in place or had been, I guess having law enforcement, letting them do their job, letting Border Patrol do their job. So even my sister back home, two old women, right? She's 50-something now. And even to this day, you go visit her and she's always got her sidearm on her, and it's even to hang out in the house, to go out to the barn, to go mow, and it's like you've always got to carry this gun on you now, and it's like everything else that we've kind of talked about today. It's turned into this new mentality and this new normal that this is just what I do out here, And granted, luckily she hasn't had too many issues. She's had some things go on, but not like other parts of the county. And I'd mentioned to you about a DA lady that I had a podcast with, and she talked about ranchers being run off their property for a few days by cartel. And so it's here. We talked about here in Bulverde and people getting their cars stolen, and we've literally we've allowed ourselves to be more like Mexico was back in the earlier days. Yeah. And it's only going to get progressively worse. Now, one thing that I have kind of noticed, and we talked about this earlier as well, but, the border crossings seem to have lessened. But that doesn't mean that we've decreased on the amount of people that we've let in, because there's other means that they're allowing them in.
When you say illegal border crossings have gone down and you fly them over the border from Mexico City into our countries, technically they're still crossing the border, but they don't count those.
Right.
So, and that's a shame. What we've seen happen, And like I said, I don't talk politics because I represent the state of Texas. We're apolitical, but I do talk about policies which affect us directly, not only as a department, but as citizens. And when you have a wide open border, and it's wide open, there's nothing to stop someone saying, no, you can't come in. They're coming in by, anywhere from 10 to 30,000 a day we've been getting for the last 3 years. Yeah. They say there's 13, 14 million illegal crossings in the last 3 years. It's got to be in the 20s.
Yeah, I was going to say
that those numbers are not right. And that's where, we talk about the Venezuelan gangs. When they're dumping out their prisons, they say that's hate speech from Trump saying, no, they're really dumping out their prisons because, for one, Venezuela's broke. They can't feed themselves. Why would they feed their prisoners? So when they let them out, they tell them to come up here. Well, you see in Colorado, these apartments and these hotels are getting overran, and even in El Paso by these Venezuelan gangs.
What are they called? What's the name of that gang in particular?
Yeah, there's an acronym that's I'd have to look it up. But these gangs are they're probably some of the worst. They're like the Taliban. They do the tortures. I've seen the videos they do with beheadings and torturing and gang raping. I mean, it's just savages. They're absolute savages, and they're here. They're here on our doorstep. And not to instill fear, but to be aware of the public, because I've always talked about this border for years, but now that it's an election year, it's come out a little more.
Sure.
It was always that, when we're trying to build a wall, I mean, it was, Trump's racist. He wants to keep every Hispanic out. No, that's not. We want to keep everybody who doesn't belong here out until they could legally come in. Every country's that way. I can't go to another country and say, I'm going to live here and you're going to pay me forever and I'm going to vote in your elections. They'd laugh me all the way out. And we're the only country in the world that's incentivized them, because as soon as we changed from Trump to Biden, they were waiting with the Biden shirts on the border. That's footage we saw on TV. Yeah. And if somebody wasn't informed, like, why do they all have Biden shirts on? Because they've incentivized. They immediately took away all the policies that were enacted to diminish or to not as make it so great to come over here, and wiped them off the books. And then when they're here, they're giving them cash, and there's no IDs. If you came across, my name is John Smith, my birth date is this, they have no way to prove it. We can't look into their database. The only database we have is if that person was arrested here before and we can get their fingerprint, we could tell they're lying. But if they're some Venezuelan gang member thug that's murdered so many people, we have no way of knowing that. And then what Mayorkas, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, just came out with that report, and these are his words. It's from the ICE director. 620,000 illegals that are confirmed here are convicted criminals. 15,000 immigrants have been convicted of sexual crimes. These are the ones we have control of that we could send back, but we're not. So 13,000 are convicted murderers. That's not included in the gotaways. So out of those 400,000, that's small. It seems like a small amount of number, but think about that. There's some towns around here that are 15 to 20,000 people in these outlying communities. Picture every one of them being a rapist or a murderer and living amongst you. I mean, gonna make you a little nervous? Yeah. I mean, look what's happened to 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungren in Houston. Going to the store, gets brutally raped and beaten for 2 hours. She put up a fight. They killed her, choked her, and threw over a bridge like she's a piece of garbage. And those two animals, because they were both vetted at the border. One was given an ankle monitor and said, you're going to wear that for 3 weeks. We're going to monitor you. Then you can take it off because we're not going to monitor you anymore, which ankle monitors don't do anything anyway. It's not like in the movies. You think if you stepped outside to take a leak and you have an ankle monitor on, it's going to alert the police and they're going to show up. It doesn't work that way. That's only in the movies. Then the other one said he sought asylum, and we're going to watch you real close, young man. And they just went off and did their thing. And then, unfortunately, now she and many other victims that are out there, men and women, not talking about just sexual assaults, but murders that are going on. And the biggest one that should have been an eye-opener for somebody who's not, like I said, I don't like watch the news, but I have to because it's life and you have to stay informed. But some people I know that don't know what's going on. But if they saw that clip where that in the New York subway, where that officer getting pummeled and kicked and beaten by 8 illegal immigrants, and not just Monday morning quarterback, but New York's a whole lot different than Texas. There's a lot of officers that refuse or refrain from using deadly force because they're worried about going to jail themselves, because there are policies in those states that would rather put them in jail. He had every right to pull out that gun and start blasting them. You shoot 3 or 4 of them, the rest are going to run. But he was about to get beat to death. They arrested the ones they arrested. The next day, they bailed out. And when the news media went to confront them, what did he do? Double middle finger, physically, double middle finger to the cameras and smiling, and then fled to California. So what, if that doesn't infuriate you as an American, and then I don't know what will, because that shows right there that they have no remorse for what they did beating that cop, because there's no repercussion, there's no penalty for it. So what's that going to do? It's going to make more people like him say, hey, we can do whatever the hell we want. And we're not going to jail. Right, and now. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
That's what's happening all over the place. And I mean, what other country would allow 15,000 illegal immigrants who are here illegally that we said, sign this ticket, and then 3 to 6 years, we're going to call you and you're going to go to court and you're going to pay for this. And they're like, yeah, right, whatever. And, oh, by the way, here's $2,500 cash and you can get on that airplane and go to this state. They're there. I mean, when I came back from Vegas last December from the rodeo finals, there's about 20, like from Honduras, they had a sign. He said, do not speak English. However, this is the contact number. And all of them passed me, and they went back to the plane and sat. I guarantee you not one of them had a valid ID that we know who they are, but we're putting them on airplanes. But I had to go through the whole, X-ray and go through the process. But it's scary what they're doing. And that's why they always do it at night, secretly. And when they say the numbers at the border are down and they're flying them from Mexico over our border, and they don't count that as an illegal entry because we flew them in.
Right.
And I say we, because our government is flying them in here. And what's the reason for that? Why would we do that? It's to make the numbers look good, because there's so many uninformed people out there who are just living in this la-la land, in this bubble, that they're not informed. So, well, and then look at this election that's going on right now. We have the person who's been deemed the border czar. That was not only the president's words for her, but the whole media called her that, and forever, until she was chosen to run. And then they said, oh, and she was never a border czar. No, there's footage. We can prove you called her the border czar. She went one time to El Paso. She never went down to Laredo, Del Rio. She never went down to Rio Grande City to see all this nonsense going on. And
it's so frustrating as a population, because I sit there, I get frustrated because we continue to do the same things over and over. Mm-hmm. People were complaining, and initially the gripe was, hey, these are just families trying to come across for a better life. And there was a few, but I've had podcasts, I told you earlier, with like Gary and Victor, and they've been talking about it for years, and
they're experts. They've seen it for a living. I only seen it as a trooper going on deployments down there, but you look at 1980, they talked about the border crossings annually was about 250 to 300,000 a year. But guess what? When those people came over here, 300,000, they came here to work, and they went back. Because I always say Americans are lazy. Sure. They don't want to do the hard work. Sure. But the ones in Mexico, not only can they handle the work, they'll do the work for a whole lot less, and then they go back. But what we're getting now, they're not coming here to work. Some are, but they're coming here to live, and to live off our dime. And because it's out there, who wouldn't?
Well, people also sit there and they find it hard to believe that, Venezuela's opening jails and letting inmates out and go to the country and tell them not to come back or they'll kill them. But what frustrates me is a lot of people just think that's unfathomable. And it's like, that's what Castro did in the 70s. You watch the movie Scarface, that's exactly what that is. They release
and the
all
media spins it that,
across.
that's just Trump running his mouth.
Yeah.
No, these are facts.
Yeah.
They just, because it's coming from him, they automatically deem it as false information, misinformation. But no, you look at our stats on what we have. And like I said, they say there's 13 to 15 million illegally here in the last 3 years. I'm telling you, that number's doubled. Because they don't know how many got away. Yeah. So for every 100 that are apprehended and sign a ticket to appear, there may be 300 to 500 more that made it past. Yeah. We don't know. And we don't know, but they're all over the place.
Well, with this, so there's so many things that go on with the border, and this is the difficult part, and this is why I appreciate having you come to the podcast. Is you go to CNN, you're going to get CNN spin. You're going to go to Fox, you're going to get Fox spin, and this weird thing started happening where I start to go to social media, and I go to social media and I hear these things happening because you're getting in some information that you won't from the news. So what I do is I'll go, that sounds strange, let me dig into it, and I'll go to multiple sources, and eventually I'll kind of find out what's going on. But we don't get that information unless it's presented to us. So what else? We've got this Venezuela gang that was in El Paso and also in Aurora. We know about some of these things that happen to these young girls. There's I think it was a year or two ago. It was like 80-something thousand children. They didn't know where they were. I'm sure it's probably doubled by now. What are some of the other things that you can share with us that are concerns of DPS that probably should be on the populace's radar as well?
Well,
maybe we're not.
People didn't know a couple years what fentanyl was. Everybody knows what that word is now because they hear it, because it's been pushed out there more to where, you're having these kids who are, these young 16, 17-year-old teenagers like, yeah, take this pill. It's a Xanax. It'll make you feel good. And we'll actually know that thing had fentanyl in it. And we know how much can kill a guy our size, the tip of a pencil lead. That's all it takes. So we're losing, I think the numbers now annually are over 150,000 a year, maybe 200,000 a year.
Wow.
Accidental overdoses, because they're not, and people say, oh, well, they shouldn't be taking fentanyl. They think they're taking something else. But China sends the fentanyl to Mexico. There's an undercover video I watched. A lady, God, I can't think of her name, but it was on it was Netflix or Hulu. She goes undercover with the cartels, and they're all masked up. She gets blindfolded. They drive her to there, and she gets to watch them make this stuff. And she says to the cartel guys, you guys are killing so many young people in America. And they're like, we don't care. It's all about the dollar. They're dumb enough to take it. And they said they lace it with fentanyl. Sometimes it's a little too much. They don't care if it kills. And those were his words. We don't care. America's dumb. They're dumb enough to take it. These illegal drugs, not prescribed by a doctor, then they deserve to die. That's the mentality some of these third world countries have. It's all about the dollar. They don't care about human life.
Right.
But as Americans, we think, oh, who would ever do that on purpose? And that's the big misconception. These kids dying of fentanyl poisoning, they think, well, these kids are using these hardcore drugs. It's like, no, they're using just stuff they think is prescription pills that they got on the black market to get high. And
they make it look like candy too.
Yeah, and we have this fentanyl programs we push out to these young kids and in these high schools, but also talk about human trafficking. That is one of the biggest businesses, always has been, is trafficking young men, women, young boys and girls from all different parts of the world across our borders into this horrific appetite that we have in this country for that market, and it's terrible.
Is it mostly sex trafficking, or are they?
It's labor trafficking as well. We have all these massage parlors going on in Waco, Killeen, Temple that are getting busted, and I always think, how do they even operate anymore? Because when they do bust them, and they're in depth investigation, but all these young girls from China, they come from China here illegally to go work at Uncle Kim's massage parlor, thinking it's just going to be a legit business. Well, it turns out it's a sex trade, and they're not going to say anything because they're scared. And Chinese they don't challenge the government, so they're sleeping in the back of these places. They have all beds and everything laid up in these little deals, but they're always getting busted. I think another one just got busted in my area. I can't think what city it was, but you hear about it all the time. It's I think it was in Austin and Houston, but it was just on the news yesterday when I was driving that they noticed in the back, and then they had their ads on and had the pictures of these girls in this lingerie, come get your massage, and so you have your kitchen labor, some of these places, your construction workers, they're here thinking, it's like a mob boss mentality. You're going to come work over here, you're going to make $10 a day. I get $7, you get $3, but I'm going to put you up in a place to live and feed, and then you could send that money back home. So what are these people who came from dirt poor countries? Well, that's a good deal. I'm making more here than I was there anyway. But if I say anything, I'm going to get arrested, and if I cross this guy, they're going to kill me. Yeah. So we have these adults that are getting trafficked. It's human. It's modern day slavery.
Yeah,
it really is.
And what's crazy is the structure, the pay structure, the hey, you owe me X amount of dollars. It literally creates slaves out of these people that are never going to get out of that debt.
They never. And then the money they spend to get over here, these coyotes, they cost them anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000. You know how much money that is in our world.
Yeah,
that's equivalent to $150,000, $200,000 just to get here. And then when they get, they just get abandoned. Some of them get killed along the way. They die along the way. They get snake bit, they get injured, they fall off a cliff, in the middle of the night and hurt themselves. The coyote's not going to...
Or even they get raped from where they left home all the way over here.
I think the last time I was here, I told the story about those two girls that were 11, 12 years old that were just had traveled up here, and then they fled and went to this neighborhood. And I was tall enough to look over the fence. They're hiding over behind the air conditioner, and they were sisters. And I remember talking to the Border Patrol agent, and I was like, man, they're babies. And I felt so bad for them. And they were so dirty, and they smelled so bad because they'd been on the road for weeks. And they said, yeah, he said, that's not the worst part. The worst part is in order for them to eat or have food or whatever to keep coming, they get raped almost daily.
Yeah.
I said, these little kids, he said, oh yeah. He said, we get a lot of young girls that are pregnant, 12, 13 years old. Yeah. And it's the saddest thing ever. I mean, it's just unbelievable what a human being will do to another. You know, it's very sad.
Yeah.
It really is.
You know, people, I get so frustrated when you hear people talk about compassion, you know, for people coming up to the border. And yes, there's some sort of compassion that you have to have for folks, but they always ignore that portion of it. They always ignore the little girl.
They don't want to hear the reality of it. You know, they don't want to hear the tragedies along the way. You know, they think, yeah, just let everybody in. We'll pay for it. Well, look what happened with the hurricane that just happened in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. FEMA said, Mayorkas said a couple months ago, we have enough money. We're funded for all the storms for the year. Then he came out 2 days ago, we're out of money.
Yeah.
And guess where $650 million went to house illegal immigrants around the country? $650 million.
Yeah.
But they're giving these people there a one-time payment of $750. What's that going to do?
Nothing.
Buy you a few pairs of shoes, clothes, because you've lost everything.
Yeah.
You know, and then they're still having, they don't know how many there's still hundreds missing. Because this is the area I go every October. My wife and I to vacation in Bryson City. I don't even know if you can get there anymore. A lot of those roads are washed out, but it's near the Tennessee border on the west side. And, you know, it's beautiful mountains. So when you get 30 inches of rain, I mean, that's funneling that water to these communities. And they've never seen this kind of flooding in ever. So all these communities that are built, they're just washed away. They're gone. Yeah. And all the people are too. And, you know, listen to the stories from the first responders yesterday on the radios. They said they were going, I mean, the first responders are going hungry and thirsty. They can't get supplies in there. You see a lot of civilian helicopters. Matter of fact, one of the business owners in Gatesville, the guy that Curves Women's Fitness Center, he flew over there, him and his family, and were airdropping stuff to these people that couldn't get there because all the roads are gone. They're washed out, and it's going to take years to rebuild them. But we don't know how many people are gone, and some of the officers are saying the long-time effects of what they've had to see is they went to one place they thought was Halloween decorations in the tree. It was human bodies in the tree line because the water was up 30 feet.
Wow. And
I mean, you try to think about, put that in perspective, how fortunate we are to not have to go through something like that. But those people had no idea it was coming, and they weren't prepared. There was nothing prepared for that. You know, the North Carolina, they didn't expect that, and they didn't have any, you know, Florida prepared. They had all the trucks staging because they know there's going to be power lines down as there is every hurricane. And I think Georgia did as well. But North Carolina thinking, well, by the time it comes across, the landfall usually drops pretty quick, which it did, but it hung over there and dumped all that rain. And I think it was 32 inches in just a few hours. So, I mean, these levels were rising 20, 30 feet, these rivers, and just wiping everything out in its path. That
was similar to what happened in Houston, too, several years back, where I think the hurricane just stalled out. Mm-hmm. And had it kept moving, it would have been wouldn't have been as bad as it was, but it stalled out.
I think it stalled out and then came back or something. Yeah. It moved, and it was very unorthodox, but it did. I remember that. And but yeah, so we won't know for a long time I think the number I heard this morning coming in was 250 something.
Really?
That they said, unfortunately, it's going to go way up.
Well, you know what's frustrating is the whole $750 deal, and the fact that all that money's been allocated to illegals. You know, but you know, you go back and it's almost like it's a reoccurring theme because you go back to the fires in Hawaii, and I think they were giving folks like $600 who lost everything. And
they talk about the money they still have. There's still money earmarked for illegal immigration.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense. Yeah. I don't understand it.
It's available. It's just earmarked.
Yeah, we can't spend that because we need that to bring these folks in. And I don't know what the ultimate plan is. You know, I'm not an expert. I just try to, you know, do my own investigation with facts because, like you said, the news outlets, they're going to put out what they want.
Yeah.
And but you have to listen. And the best thing was these phone calls coming in from people in that area. They're talking about, where's our federal government? They're not even here.
Yeah.
No one's here. That we have gotten nothing. FEMA finally made it a week later, And they talked about, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they talked about the military and the National Guard helicopters just sitting there and they're not doing anything. And they said, well, they haven't been given orders yet. And that's what I was told. That was on one outlet, so I don't know if it's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. But, it's like me seeing somebody in a burning car. You're going to go get them out? Nope, no one's told me to get them out yet.
Right.
That's where the good thing about these people that you see on Facebook, that's where you get a lot of information. These people that are there say, look, we're country folks. We know how to survive. We have to take care of each other because you can't rely on the government to take care of you because they're not. That they give this false sense of security that, we're here to help you and we're going to take care of you just in an emergency. Well, they haven't done a good job in this one, unfortunately. And at the cost of how many more lives, how many people that are abandoned or starving, have no water or have medicines they lost, insulin dependent folks that have probably died because they haven't had insulin in a week.
Right.
We don't know. There's no communication. There's police departments, entire towns, communication centers that are just gone. Yeah. We don't know.
There's one group that I kind of follow and I don't know if they're just a small group that get a lot of attention or if the attention they get is due to them. But I don't know if you ever heard of the Cajun Navy.
Yeah.
So I see them everywhere.
When we went to Hurricane Harvey in 2017, that's when they showed up in their boats. Yeah.
And
they were everywhere.
It's crazy because from what I gather, they're just an organization that's gotten bigger.
It has. Since Katrina, it's grown a lot because everyone's like, hey, I got to pick up in a bass boat or a boat, and I'd love to help.
Yeah. And to me, it's like it's unfortunate because we do put trust in the federal government to show up and provide and help.
I mean, we give them the money. We kind of expect it in return.
That's what you expect.
But unfortunately, no.
But it's literally comes down to just regular folks who are neighbors, who are a state over, who are a town over, who show up with a chainsaw or a bass boat or something. And I think we need to be more active in that way. We need to be more conscious of our neighbor and their needs. Absolutely. But at the same time, when you come across an organization like this, if you're ever got a wild hair to donate to something, it's like, yes, your tax dollars are being forced in one direction, but it's never coming back.
Well, and that's what people were saying yesterday on the radio. They're like, yeah, we went to donate money directly to these fire departments, and FEMA's like, no, we'll take the money, put it in our fund. It's like, the hell you will. Yeah. You don't have any left. Look what you've done with it. Yeah. And that's what people are saying, don't donate to the Red Cross. I'm not saying that, but because there's such out there not allocating the money properly. Yeah. And one couple, they had called and said, we go hiking every year it was like the 25th, 30th anniversary. They had $2,500 saved for this trip. They're going to drive there and literally hand the money to people who need it and to able to buy supplies and everything. So, yeah. So, I mean, and every little bit helps. I'm not saying not donate. They need all the help they can. And, and it's going to be neighbor helping neighbor and the rest of the country to kind of chip in because like the old days, you hear ranchers, if somebody got sick or went down, the other rancher would come and work their crops and plow their fields because they're in bed sick right now. And, they'd return the favor if they had to. And you just feel so bad because we are so blessed as Americans to have such nice things and we worked hard for it. But imagine going home and your home's gone. Imagine some of these cars they talked about that were in the river, they're full of bodies. So there's been families that have just been annihilated, wiped out. And it's going to be, as the time goes on, it's going to come to light on how many people really were affected by this. Yeah. And then you have the whole supply thing going on the East Coast, which luckily put a Band-Aid on it for a couple months till January, but they were shut down and they think, well, now that which a lot of those things are car parts and stuff, I get it. Sure. But there's other things that needed for machinery to work to be able to clear out all this mud and everything. Because they say it's going to take years to rebuild the infrastructure. The highways, it's going to take years and years and years.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where, your state and federal governments help out. But what people need to be more mindful of is the immediate help comes from one-on-one. Yeah. I'd heard the same thing similar, and I don't remember what exactly whether it was the Red Cross or who it was, but, a lot of times people, and this is something that individuals need to go do their own research, right? Because there's a lot of organizations that help folks where you say, hey, there's been a fire across Hawaii or there's been a hurricane on the East Coast. I want my money to go to that. Yeah. And there's some organizations that say, okay, when they take that money and they allocate it there. But then there's a lot of other organizations that they cover so many broad things in so many parts of even the world, where it's like, no, you're donating here, but it's going into a large pot. Yeah. And that's going to get distributed however we're distributing.
And that's what a lot of people I know, when they want to do something directly, like for a local animal shelter, they'll take dog food to the local animal shelter. You know that if you give them $20 for dog food, not saying they'd put it somewhere else, but you don't know where it goes. But yeah, that's and then you hear, and I don't know if it's true, but I remember a few years ago, there was a whole list of all these organizations, and I'm not going to say them, but like the CEOs making $5, $6, $8 million a year. Yeah. It's like, why do they need that much? We know then. Sure. I know they're bringing in hundreds of millions, but why are you going to pay them that much? This is supposed to go to a better cause for less fortunate people. Right. How about pay them, a handsome salary, $150,000 a year? That's pretty good money, and let the rest go to where it's supposed to go. But I think greed, supersedes a lot of things, and that's just me thinking. And you would think that's a volunteer position to be. You could see some wealthy businessman being the CEO of this organization without taking a penny from him. That's the way I would think it would work. Yeah, not somebody becoming a millionaire by being part of this nonprofit. So I don't know.
And there's a few out there. A lot of people just need to do their own research.
That's it. Do your own research. If we have the internet at our disposal, word of mouth. I mean, we no longer need to just listen to one person on TV, a talking head telling us what to do. So we're all independent thinkers, and it's time I think we've gotten back to that. A lot of people have, because their eyes have been opened to what's going on. I feel like we're merging
that way, yeah.
And we're definitely going that way. We need to.
There's still a whole lot of people who like to just eat what they're fed. So
yeah, and you can still tell people the sky's blue. They say nope, it's orange. And you're not going to get through to them. But unfortunately, they're out there. But that's why. Yeah. We just got to do our own thing. So,
what are some things that folks need to be mindful of? We're coming to the end of the year here. We talked about drunk driving and all that other good stuff. But what are some of the things folks need to be concerned with? Here towards the end of the year, but also going into 2025. Is there something on DPS's radar that you guys are concerned about?
Yeah, well, with the loss of our trooper last week, and 2 days after he was struck, we had another trooper in Houston was struck on a traffic stop. So we're definitely pushing out the move over, slow down law. And of course, if you haven't heard of it by now, what the move over, slow down law is: any emergency vehicle, whether it's tow truck, police, fire, EMS, somebody on the side of the road with their lights activated, and you're approaching them, the law requires you to slow down 20 miles an hour below the posted speed limit or vacate the lane if there's multiple lanes. We're getting these officers and tow truck drivers are getting killed by working these crash scenes, which are dangerous as it is. And we ask everybody that is out there driving just to get your heads out of the phone, be mindful. Anytime you see flashing lights, and a lot of people get complacent. You know why? Because there's so much construction going on. Sure. You see that with the crush truck and the police officer that's required to be in that crash zone. People just think, it's just another construction zone, and but not realizing it's legit car wreck, and there's an officer, there's a human body that's out there, within feet of you doing 70 miles an hour past them. So that's why we asked to vacate the lane, slow down. We want to prevent these tragic things from happening. And unfortunately, like I said, we lost one trooper, was laid to rest 2 days ago, and then one that's still in really bad shape in the hospital and recovering, but was nearly killed. I watched the video when he was struck, and he was struck the car was moving pretty good.
Do you think, let me ask you this, in your opinion, and answer however you want, but do you feel like, because I'll speak for myself. Mm-hmm. I feel as though our driving class prior to people getting their driver's license could be a little more thorough. I feel like a lot of younger drivers, there's a lot of young people out there that I know are afraid to drive. There's a lot of kids with people, I say kids, we talked about that earlier, folks with anxiety who have anxiety about driving.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I feel like I find myself when there's an accident or there's an emergency vehicle coming, you see people that almost like they freeze and they don't move out of the lane. And a lot of time I see them and I feel as though it's almost like they don't know what to do. And it's funny because I think about, I took my driving test. I was late, man. I was 18 already. I'd been driving since I was 9 back home, but I was 18. But like the driver test and even the part of the driving portion. Even when I did my motorcycle one, you can only learn so much in a short period of time through that class. But as an adult, as a nearly 50-year-old, I sit there and go, they're not teaching these kids nearly enough. Is that changing, or is that something? Has it improved? Because I feel like so many of these young people don't have the
we
tools.
do go to these driver's ed courses, and we go and talk to these kids. We show them our PowerPoints with the crashes and what could happen, and a lot of them still have their heads buried down. They're not paying attention, but some do. But you also have the ones that are self-taught at home. We don't know how thorough those parents are and teach them, and we hope that they are because they're parents. But then some, probably like, oh, he's fine. We'll just sign off that, he or she has driven this many hours. But you talk about young kids not wanting to drive. I couldn't wait to get my license at 16. But my stepson, he was 16. We talked about him driving. He wasn't ready, and they didn't want to push it on him because that is a huge responsibility. And it can get you killed if you mess up. So then 17 came along. He still didn't want to drive. I'm like, dude, you're going to be graduating high school next year. You need a job. You need I don't want to push it on you, but. And then finally, he was nearly 17 and a half or whatever. He started driving, got his license, did the self-taught, did really well. Well, guess what? After he got used to it, he was gone all the time. He was in that car after school, gone to his friends. So once he got over the fear of it, and it could be a scary thing, and especially when we got our license 32 years ago, the population was half. There wasn't this kind of traffic around. But you look at the traffic now, it's outrageous. So it could make anybody. Hell, it made me nervous driving through here in my patrol car, coming through the construction zone in San Marcos. And I thought I was going to get run over.
San Marcos is a nightmare.
No, I know. But, it's, that's what I recommend every parent. Don't force it on them. Let them know, teach them slowly. Go to a parking lot, and go out in the pasture, teach your kid to drive if you have one, and just let them get familiar with the mechanics before you throw them out there in the highway. And if they're not ready, they're not ready. If they're not ready till they're 20, wait till they're 20, because you don't want to put somebody behind the wheel that's terrified. Yeah. And then they clam up and then they get themselves hurt or killed.
I really like that you just said that, because I was disagreeing with you until you said that, like the way you did, because it made me think about myself.
Because not everybody's like me. I couldn't. When I was 13, I wanted to drive now. I wanted to go out and rodeo and travel and have my fun. But I was 13, I couldn't do it. I had no fear of driving. But there's some kids out there that, and young adults, don't force it on them. I love to drive.
I shouldn't say. I probably shouldn't say this in front of you, but I was my dad's designated driver at 9 years old. But I was, I talked to some friends of mine who have boys that are driving now, or that are, one of them just got his license, the other one's fixing to. But I guess the old guy in me, I grew up in Georgia West that had a population of 2,000, right? So I might drive 10 miles and not see a single car.
Yeah. Back then there was nothing out there.
And here, in like larger cities, Houston, Austin, Dallas, you've got a 16-year-old kid learning to drive in traffic with construction and rush hour and people honking. I think back to when I was younger. I don't know if I could have handled that.
I know that's a lot. I mean, like I said, I really coming through. I'm not familiar with San Marcos construction. I came in off the tollway, the back way, and then there was this interchange where I thought I was wanting to go straight, but you had to cross. There's an intersection there. I forget which highway it was, but before you get on the interstate, kind of by the DPS office, you have to go in the wrong lane, which is the right lane, and then you merge underneath. So the roads cross like this. And I was like, man, this is weird. I'm following the arrows.
I think they do that at Buc-ee's, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere out that way. But yeah, I had to cross what you would think was the old road, but you could see the red reflectors in the road. So I followed the arrow, went through the light, went under the bridge, then got on to 35.
Right.
But I was like, man, this is crazy.
So I guess that's important, and it's well said that back then we pushed kids to drive, so we didn't have to drive them anywhere. But now if they're not ready, they're not ready. And again, if it's
introduce to them slowly, don't make it like it's something they have to do. Say, hey, let's just like my 15-year-old. We went to feed horses, and I let him drive my brand new truck from the gate to the barn, and he's never driven before. So I said, all right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in here. I'm going to put it in park. You're going to put your foot on the brake, and we're going to we're not even going to touch the gas. I'm going to put it in drive, and we're going to coast because it'll automatically drive. So it did like 5 miles an hour from like 200 yards to the barn on a dirt road, and he was smiling ear to ear. And I said, all right, that's your first driving lesson. So, and we'll start out slow because, I know he's not that type that he's talked lately about his license, and I said, well, we're gonna work on it, and we'll see where you're at when you turn 16. So
Gen X was feral, weren't we?
yeah, we were like wild. It was pretty,
Good
times.
I tried like you always go, well, when I was a kid, and I think back on it, I'm like, yeah, we were probably raised little.
Well, like in the 80s growing up, and my mom and my grandmom, we'd go to Germany for our summers. We'd get on our bikes in the morning. We'd be gone all day. We were in the woods. We were making fires. We were making forts. We were traveling to other towns on the highway, doing all this stuff on our bikes. We had no cell phones. They had no idea where we were, but we came home for dinner, and that was it. And we got to telling her about all the things we've done, how far we went. She's like, y'all went that far? Oh my God, that's a long way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we wasn't going to tell you, but we survived. We survived.
Let me ask you this. I know we had talked about some topics we wanted to hit on, but I was just thinking this earlier. I had seen some, maybe a podcast or a movie, but they talked about how, I guess there was a massive Chinese population that had moved into California. And they had talked about cartel grows popping up in national parks. Are we seeing anything similar like that in here in Texas, where cartels are maybe conducting business in parts of the state that we're not aware of, or even in national parks? The one that I had seen in California, they were popping up in like national parks and state parks. Are we seeing anything as wild as that here in Texas? Or
I can't say that we are. I haven't heard or seen anything like that. But I mean, we know the cartels they're a very well-ran business. I mean, it's $1 billion, if not more, business that, they're very sophisticated. They're so damn wealthy, and they're so powerful, especially on the other side of the border. I mean, the law enforcement and government over there don't have a chance. We know who's running it because it's all about the money and the power. And yeah, unfortunately, we have this Operation Lone Star that unfortunately is still going on because the federal government turned their back on our border security. So Governor Abbott took it, using our resources, our state troopers, to go down there and that's the problem, that what we have as troopers is we're sending all these troopers down there to secure the border best we can. Well, those troopers are not stopping 100 cars a week, 50 to 100 cars a week back home. So what happens to our fatality rates? They go up. Our drunk drivers are not getting caught. People not wearing their seatbelts are not getting caught. The speeders are not getting caught, and they're ultimately crashing. So our crash numbers are going up. So we're definitely, I know that the directors talked about, we have like a little over 3,000 troopers, which is, we need at least 6,000 for the population of Texas for what we're doing. Because we traditionally, as troopers, worked non-incorporated areas out in the rural areas. That's not incorporated by the city limits. But the way the state is growing and all the interstate traffic, and we definitely need more enforcement on that end. And we hope that the border can be secured and our government do its job and use their funds and not ours to secure our southern border and let us get back to work to where we need to be, what we're supposed to be doing. And then, but that's the ripple effect. When something like that happens, it's the people on this side, we're seeing these crashes not being reduced and our fatalities going up. And that's with our population growth. We used to average anywhere from 32 to 3,500 fatalities a year, and now we're up in the 4,000s. And of course, that naturally comes with population growth. But, and it's not our job to make anyone a better driver. We just catch them when they're messing up. That's why we tell everybody, hey, you guys are responsible for not only your own life, but the people around you. Yeah, you see us, you get caught for speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, or thrown in jail for DWI. That's on you, but we're put in that position. So number one, you reduce your speed, try to obey the speed limit best you can. As hard as it is, your life depends on it and someone else's. Wear that dang seatbelt. There's still people out there, I'm not gonna wear a seatbelt. What if I crash in the water and get stuck? If you crash in the water and you're in a seatbelt, you hit the button and it works, even underwater. I don't know where they get that in their head, but I've never in my whole career have seen a crash where somebody crashed in the water and died because they couldn't get their seatbelt off. But I've seen hundreds, if not over 1,000 or more, where they've a simple rollover and they get ejected and they're dead.
Yeah.
But and then of course the DWI. It's so easy to never get a DWI. It is. We've never taken anyone to jail, even though they may have gotten off in court or fought it. We've never taken anyone to jail for DWI that was not drunk or impaired by another substance. And it's such an easy thing. And like I said, when I don't know if that was on there or off there, we talked about when we're arresting a drunk driver, and they see the tow truck come, and they're like, I can call so and so to get this truck. I can call this. They list off all these people. I'm like, man, you should have called them. You should have called them earlier. We wouldn't be here.
Right.
So yeah, so it's like I said, it's not the government's job to make sure we're okay. It's our own job initially, but working for the government, for the state, we clean up the aftermath and we try to prevent a lot of it. But ultimately, every driver is responsible. I'm responsible for everyone's safety when I'm behind the wheel, whether I'm in my patrol car or in my pickup truck, just like everybody else is around them. Because between here and back home, that's a 2-hour drive. I don't know what I'm going to come across. I may come across a crash. I normally do, and I'll have to stop. And it just, there's so many, especially being a weekend, beautiful weather. Everybody's out doing their thing. So
we talked a little bit earlier about I guess the cat and mouse game between like the federal government and state when it came to like the border and things going on down there. What's that relationship like that you're aware of, as far as like the Border Patrol agents and maybe not even the whole entity, but the relationship between the Border Patrol and the state of Texas as far as the border comes, has one gotten out of the way a little bit more to the other one, or are they communicating, or are they cooperating better?
From my experience down there, we've always worked together greatly with them, and we would watch how they did their surveillance on these people coming across or drug loads, and then they would come across. The next the chase was on, and we'd get in it, and that was back when we were chasing mostly drug runners. And now, I haven't been deployed down there since I promoted to this position, but we're still sending troops down there into El Paso to sit in a car and watch this border to assist the Border Patrol, because they're so overwhelmed with the influx of all these people. And instead of taking them, processing them, and sending them back, they take them, process them, and send them on their way in. I mean, why even bother process them?
Yeah.
Nothing's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Just at this point, just let them go across, and do nothing, because that's what's going on. There's no vetting going on. You can't prove who is who, and even if they do, they don't turn them around.
Yeah.
They just let them in. So the Border Patrol, I could imagine being in their shoes, how frustrated they are, because they have a job to do and they're not allowed to do it, and that's what sucks.
I feel like, was it last year or maybe earlier this year? I thought I had read something where Abbott had talked about, I don't know if it was arresting or sending illegals back.
Arresting them for trespassing.
Was it trespassing?
Yeah, and then of course, then all the local jails, they can't handle that. What do we do? Arrest 3,000 people a day and stuff them into jail that can only hold 200?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So we try to do other things, like with the wire and the boxes, to secure these points where these people are just walking across. We put the containers out there with the wire, and our own government sued us to take it down, like the buoys. Remember the orange buoys? That was a major point where people were crossing. Well, guess what? It worked. So the government didn't like it.
Are those still out there?
Yeah, I think they're still there, because it's going back and forth in courts. But with these shipping containers with the wire on them, it works. I mean, it doesn't look good. It sucks for the people that own land along there, but it's keeping the people. It's a deterrent, because there's no wall being built. The pieces that are still there, they're laying on their side in the sun, getting warped. And we're spending, I like the last number I heard was $1 million a week for law enforcement to guard all that property. And it's just sitting there. It could have been, for the money we've spent in the waste of money we've spent in housing and keeping these people here illegally, that border could have been done multiple times, could have been built, the border wall. And it's not 100%, but it damn sure works. I mean, it keeps them from entering at all these easy points, and it funnels them to a certain area where they can be easily apprehended and processed from there. It just blows my mind how people are so against it. It has nothing to do with race or hatred toward any kind of people. It's about our security.
Yeah.
Every door we have in our house has a lock on it, and I lock it at night, because I don't want somebody just to come in. I don't know who is not welcome there. Like this building, every alarm system, camera, they're there for reasons. It's to keep the bad people from coming in and doing bad things.
Right.
And then right now they're doing it. And unfortunately, at our cost, at our expense, our civilians are out there that are having to deal with the repercussions of it.
Years ago when they first started talking about putting the border wall up, I like to pay attention to a lot of stuff. And one thing that I had read was there were multiple walls proposed. And certain portions of the federal government, I think it was on the Democrat side, they were basically shooting down anything that involved concrete. And so apparently I think there was 4 or 5 versions of the wall, and they ended up going with what they have now, which is just the vertical steel posts. But some of these walls had built into them a way to divert floodwaters, a way to, I think, harvest solar power. Like they were really complex. It just wasn't what's out there now. And when you think about it, there were so many things that these other walls could have done that, a lot of people get upset with this, and they talk about them being in like flood areas, and the water can't go through once it gets piled up with dirt and grass and everything else, but all this stuff had been thought about, but they picked the worst possible wall they could have chosen, just to be difficult, and it's frustrating because you sit there, and we talked about it earlier, how, my buddy Gary had posted that post again where, at some point you guys had, or the state of Texas had gone and put, the razor wire in, and it took as a deterrent. And every time there was a judge who would and you can find a judge anywhere to overturn anything. They went and they take these forks on this truck, and they lift up these, it's like a forklift, and they lift up the razor wire to just let people come through with zero vetting. And it's like, I tell people, I'm like, that's the federal government. And it amazes me that when somebody says, hey, we've got a border crossing problem, and we're going to put something in the way. But our federal government goes, no, we need to move that.
So what does that tell you their intentions are? They want the illegal immigration to happen.
Right.
So, and if anybody doesn't believe it, the evidence is right there.
Yeah.
What other reason would you keep your borders from being wide open?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other reason. And that's, like I said, we're the only country on this planet that would do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that park that in Eagle Pass, where there was, I think, 3,000 illegal entries a day just at that park, when DPS came in and told the Border Patrol, hey, we're going to secure this, and because this is state property, and they're like, well, it's kind of became a match between the two, but they ultimately let us shut it down. Well, guess what? I think it went from 3,000 to like 20 a day. And that's when the news media had said that troopers allowed a family just to get washed by and didn't try to rescue them, which was proven to be false. Yeah. But people spit that out there, and it's like, well, shame on you guys for saying that. So what it did, those 3,000 people had to go elsewhere to cross, which made it harder, and it funneled them to these entry points where these Border Patrol can be. That's what I always wondered when I worked there in the early days, 2007, 8, 9. I was telling another trooper, I said, what I would do if I was on that side? I'd get just 1,000 people and just walk across. And there's only 10 Border Patrol agents. What are they going to do? Grab every one of them? No, you overpower them and just walk in.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing now. So I guess it's just common sense to me, because I was like, this isn't secure. Because we would catch, or would watch them catch groups of 20, 30, 40, and they'd catch them, they'd comply, and they'd get processed and put in the trucks. And back then, I don't know what happened with them, but there was just small groups of these people from all over the world, and they're from Afghanistan, Syria, South America, China, over the world. Yeah. Polish folks.
Yeah,
I mean, it was everywhere. It's wide open. They go from Mexico and just come in.
I got a question for you. So I always feel, and I feel like we get this weird mentality that somebody else is going to take care of me, right? And there's a lot of good law enforcement. There's a lot of good programs. But from your stance, what can the population do just overall to contribute to the betterment of their community? Because you know what, if there's a fire, you're going to call the fire department, they're going to show up. If there's a crime, you're going to call law enforcement, they're going to show up. In your opinion, is it being proactive in community? Is it getting involved with programs with the children? What can the population do? Because it's not. We talk about crime earlier, and we talk about other stuff, and we talked about those 2 young men that did the shootings for like a month straight or something, and it's these are all. A lot of law enforcement, I feel, there's programs that you guys implement, but a lot of it's reactive, right? Mm-hmm. But as a community, as John Q. Public, what would be your advice for them to get involved, and maybe some programs, or maybe just daily living, what can they do better to make their community better? Because to avoid having young men like that or young women like that, it takes small changes over a long period of time. Like just going in the negative direction, right? These have all been small changes over a long period of time, and we've got to this negative place. In your opinion, what can people do better?
Well, I mean, that's a great segue. The next thing I was going to talk about, the I Watch Texas program. If you see something, you hear the commercials. If you see something that's not right or suspicious, you report it to I Watch Texas. Get on the app. You can report it. And it's now in dire emergency, of course, call 911. And that's the thing. How many of these school shootings and all these other tragic things have happened? They're interviewing someone on the news. Yeah, I always knew he or she was different. I just never said anything. So the I Watch Texas program, that's immediate. It could be, you can remain anonymous. It'll go into, it's really simple, user friendly to use. If you see something that's not right, or if you're living next to a house or a business that you see something that's not. And you don't have to be a cop to know when something's not right. We all as humans have that feeling, that gut feeling when the hairs stand on your neck that something is not normal, something's not right.
Hey, I got a couple of neighbors I watch daily. So.
And instead of looking the other way, you report it, I Watch Texas, and they send it to an investigator, and then they follow up with it. And it could be nothing. We hope it's nothing. But, at this day and age with the human trafficking and the drugs and everything going on, it's right under our noses. So the best thing I'd recommend is a community, get to know your neighbor on both sides of your house. That's all it takes. Because what if when they're gone and you see a vehicle that doesn't belong there and you're like, let me call them and just to make sure if, that person's there, and it turns out these are career burglars burglarizing their place, then you call law enforcement and then that person gets busted. But if you didn't know, you think, that's just must be one of their friends. That's funny. My wife said the other day, as a matter of fact, we had this conversation last night with my neighbor Anthony across the street. He's a retired Army Ranger. Well, he's not. He did a few years as Army Ranger. He's a young guy. He's still in his 30s. He's in the oil fields now. And I was gone somewhere to a training out of town for a week. Well, my stepson Avery pulls up. He has a scraggly beard and pulls up in his work truck. He's an electrician. Well, he's out there barbecuing, drinking his beer, and he saw her giving a hug and everything. So he starts walking over there. Hey, man, what's up? To see who it was, thinking it's Sancho or something coming over the house. But she's like, this is my son. Avery's like, oh, okay. I just, just visit. But that's a good neighbor to have, But we talked about that. It was a good laugh. But, on the flip side, all my neighbors in my little cul-de-sac where we live, we know each other. We know who belongs where. And either most of them are prior military and older. But, just get to know what, like I said, what belongs and what doesn't, and help us out because, gosh, how many people we have in Texas? 30 million, and I think we only have 3 million police officers for the entire state. Wow. And which that sounds like a lot, but it's really not.
No, it's not. I
don't even think it's 3. No, it's 30,000. What am I saying? 3 million? It's 30,000.
Really?
Yeah, police officers in the entire state, I believe, and that's we're just there to be kind of reactive. We try to be proactive and do whatever, but with this amount of people, it takes each other to rely on each other. And when something ain't right, don't necessarily take it into your own hands, but either contact the police immediately or that I Watch Texas program, look into that and see what all the stipulations could be for what you think may or may not be suspicious. You may be thwarting the next school shooting or the next bombing somewhere. Yeah. You never know.
So is that its own website, or is that on?
Yeah, just go to I Watch Texas and pull it up. And like I said, it's free. You can either download it on your phone. Any iPhone works it on a computer, and just get on there and it's brief. You can just type in what you're seeing, where you're at, and like I said, it's totally anonymous. So if you're worried about any kind of retaliation, it's not going to be. But it will be sent to an agent to follow up on that tip.
And so it's more of an investigative type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. You always hear about. And I don't know where I stand on it yet either, but you always hear about red flag laws and things like that, and neighbors using that to kind of, be a pickle to the other neighbor. But it's important. There's so many times, like you said, that we see weird things. And I'll be honest with you, I got a neighbor who's a very strange bird, man. And he keeps to himself. He does his own thing. He's very antisocial. I kind of like people like that. But there's a couple that you just kind of keep an eye on. And we even have one gentleman who's how do I want to say this? He's on a list, and he can't give any Halloween candy. But he's right next door.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because all my neighbors for the longest time, a lot of the kids have grown, but the neighborhood kids knew you don't go past Gabe's house because the guy lived next door.
Yeah.
And I always told my wife, I said, I talk to the guy every day, and for me, it's if I communicate with him daily, I kind of get an idea of what he's up to. And I had one experience. I won't use his name so I can tell this story. But one day, and I got frustrated, and tell me what I did wrong. But we had a young man that I had just recently met. He was maybe 5 or 6. And he's riding his scooter, and he goes by the mailboxes, and there's this blue car. And so I met the kid, real sweet kid. So and I see him talking to somebody in this blue car. So I go to the corner of my street, and I just stopped, and I'm watching through the rearview mirror, and I'm like, what's going on here? And so maybe I should have been a little bit more active in it, but I guess I was just trying to keep things calm. So I turn into my cul-de-sac, I come back around, and the little boy comes to the corner of the street on his scooter. And so I see him, and I go, okay, no big deal that they're done talking. But the car's still at the mailboxes. So to me, trying to act cool and like I'm not paying attention to what's going on, I went the opposite direction, go around the block. I go around the block, I come back around, and the little boy's talking to the person at the blue car again. So I stopped on the side of the road, and the little boy took off. So I see the boy leave. I go to my house, which is right around the corner. This is all really close. And I park. Well, the blue car comes, and I think he's going to turn around and leave. He parks at my neighbor's house, right? And this dude's in his 60s. And so I sit there, and I'm waiting in my truck, and I move my mirror because I want to see who gets out of the car.
Yeah.
And so I wait 10 minutes. He won't get out. So I get out of my truck, and I grab my backpack, and I'm walking, and the windows are real tinted. So trying to play it cool again, I go back in the house. I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, she had these blue bonnets. I said, hey, go check your blue bonnets and tell me who gets out of the car. So she goes out there, I won't tell her why. So she's messing around outside. She comes back inside, and she's like, it's the husband. And I said, okay. And so I ended up calling the boy's aunt because he lives with his aunt. The mom had some issues. So I called her and I said, hey, this is what happened. This is who this guy is. So just keep in mind, when the little boy's out and about. Now I felt bad, kind of, because now the little boy never got to play outside anymore.
But that's what you felt something wasn't right. And, that as we're talking about that, I pulled up the I Watch Texas thing, and it has it in English and Spanish, and you just kind of go, it's basic information. You tap it in and just go. So, but yeah, back to your deal.
But is that something to call I Watch Texas for? Or is that something that you guys can't, nothing happened? But what's a 5-year-old and talking to a 60-year-old who don't know each other?
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's unacceptable.
Right.
I mean, really, unless they're friendly neighbors, like, I know little Charlie, tell your mom I said hi, and they'll see him next time, next at the football party, whatever. But if it's, and especially in the circumstances where he was parked there and the kid kept coming back and forth, I mean, is that his next victim? You don't know. You don't want to be harsh, but you also don't want to, I mean, as a trooper, and I'm in my uniform, I wave and talk to kids. But if I'm in my truck at a stop sign, I'm not going to try to talk to these kids. Hey, guys, I'm a trooper. Come talk to me. No, I'm going to give you a sticker. I do that when I'm dressed like this and in my car where they can recognize that. Yeah. I'm not going to go and just throw myself out there to these young kids. I'll watch them to make sure that I'm not going to run them over and they're safe, but I'll just go on my way. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense for a grown man in their 60s to want to befriend a 5-year-old, especially if they're on a certain list that we manage.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I guess my question is there something I could have done better? Because I feel like other people find themselves in these weird situations where it's like a crime isn't happening, but I'm real uncomfortable about it.
Yeah. And if it doesn't, like I said, that's exactly what this is based on. If it doesn't seem right, doesn't look right, it probably isn't.
Right.
And that's good for them to know, because then they can follow up on it. And the people that are on those lists have, like, certain holidays like Halloween, they have to have all their lights off. They have, everything's locked. They can't have any interactions with trick-or-treaters. But yeah, that's something that or you can just contact your local law enforcement, because they know where they live, and maybe their parole or probation officer needs to be aware that Because if they're on that list, they know they don't need to be associating with little children that don't belong to them or their family,
So
I would think.
Let me ask you this. If somebody's on that list, is there something, and maybe it's structured differently for every person that's on that list, but is that a violation? Is him talking to a 5-year-old at the mailbox a violation of anything?
I don't know. It depends on what the stipulations are.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's going to be.
But just think, if they're arrested for a sex crime against a child, and they went to prison and back, and they're on the sex offender registry, why would they? Even if they're at a red light and the kid came wanting to talk to them, they'd be like, "Adios, I can't talk to you." I'd be gone.
Right. So that's how he should behave.
Yeah, exactly, and he knows better. But there are predators out there that they don't care. That's what they do. That's what turns them on. That's what they strive for. And you may have done the right. I think you did the right thing by, and keeping a double check on it, because your instincts took over. You're like, why is that kid at this blue car? And why is it doesn't seem right. Yeah. Especially if they don't belong. It's that simple. It's right under our noses.
In hindsight, now that I had that experience, and I've thought about it already, I'm like, if that ever happened again, I mean, the boy's probably 12 now, but if that ever happened again, well, he's probably not even 12. But I feel like a better thing would be, because he and I have rapport, because I've met him with his aunt. We've had conversations. They've been to my house type thing. I feel like the better thing to me to have done, and I wish I had have done, and I think I would in the future, is to pull over, tell the kid, "Hey, let's go to your house," and just walk him to his house. Instead of playing the little game of driving around and.
Well, and also, you fear of retaliation. You live next to the guy. You don't want to put yourself or your family in something where he may retaliate.
Less concerned. Personally, I'm less concerned with.
Yeah, exactly. But you did what was right for the protection of the child, and it's like, hey, this didn't seem right. But yeah, that'd be something for somebody out there who sees something similar to contact I Watch Texas, or just your local police department or sheriff's office that's over that area, because they're probably very familiar with that person. And sometimes these people, they never stop doing what they're doing because it's in their head to keep doing it.
I have this. I had this little thought the other day, and I have this weird thing with. The guys that hurt the girl from Houston and murdered her. That's a different thing. But I have this weird thing with quinceañeras, right? Because to me, everybody loves them, but to me, it's like culturally, a long time ago, and even not just in the Mexican culture, but 100 years ago, which isn't very long, you had people who married younger girls, and people maybe didn't live as long. You needed to have several children because you had farms and things that needed working.
Girls started having kids at 14, 15, 16 years old. That was time to go. It wasn't about education, going to college. This was life just to survive.
Yeah, and I think that's where the quinceañera came from, right? Mm-hmm. But then I see these Central and South America countries sending people up here, and you keep seeing rapes and molestation with young girls. Yeah. And part of me is like, okay, this guy's a dirtbag, obviously, but is it also a cultural thing?
And that's what I've noticed too as well over the years. It's like, some of these people from these South American countries, they come over here and staying with a family member. They're raping the 12, 13-year-old cousins, daughters, and et cetera. And, is it more prevalent over there? Possibly, I don't know. But you see a lot of it. Yeah, and it happens everywhere, but I think, like you said, it's more noticeable and it's caught your attention. And I've also wondered the same thing, is it is accepted down there where they're from? I don't know. Right. Is that normal for girls down there at 14, 15, 16 to go off and be married, start having kids? Yeah. I don't know. I don't live there, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, you see I get all the news flashes all the time on my phone. So-and-so arrested for sexual assault, 13-year-old. Well, they're from El Salvador or Honduras, somewhere. Yeah. Where that's probably more prevalent. Than
makes me wonder that too. Mm-hmm. Well, Bryan, let's talk about a few things as far as like people get involved in DPS.
Yeah, let's pull up our website here. We talked a little bit about recruiting. I'm not an official recruiter, but we have our recruiters for our department. But when we have our in-service, our director comes in and says, every one of y'all is a recruiter, because that's how I got turned on to DPS when I was 11 years old. My 4-H leader was a trooper, and he would show up in this uniform, and I wanted to be just like him. He was just showing up to be the 4-H leader, but as a young, impressionable 11-year-old, I'm like, that's exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be a cowboy and a cop all in one. And
you done it, buddy.
And my story is that man, when I went to DPS in 2006, I got to work for him. He was a sergeant in Granbury.
Oh, wow.
And I got to work for him for 1 year before he retired.
That's awesome.
So, but yeah, we're always hiring. Like I said, Texas forever growing. And, men and women of all backgrounds we have. I mean, it's a very diverse department because our state's very diverse. I remember there's a guy from Vietnam in my academy. He came over as a young man, like 17, 18. And, and of course he went back to Houston. Well, guess what? There's hundreds of thousands of people who are Vietnamese that need to come to our driver's license office or just in the community in general. And he's able to interpret, speak Vietnamese with them. So, but yeah, we're hiring. The requirements, if you go to Texas DPS, go into recruiting, it has our salary, our benefits, our age requirements, which was no more age requirement. They got rid of that years ago. There's a fitness requirements that we have. We have to pass every year, and we do that twice a year. And because it's all about this job you do. It can be very physical, but 9% of the time it's not. You're driving around the car, stopping cars. You're getting in and out, but you never know when you get in that foot chase or a fight where your life depends on it. So we have a very strict academy. It's usually about 6 months long. But looking on here. Now that when you graduate, you get a $5,000 bonus. We didn't get that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We actually, I took a pay cut coming to DPS from the department I was at. But the pay in the last 20 years has definitely gone up there. You have all your benefits.
Hey, I hate that because that's like when AT&T gives all these benefits to new customers. Yeah. And it's like, hey, I've been a customer since you were singular.
That's right. So in the next academy, looks like they're accepting applications for the B25 and C25. So there's 2 schools going on next year. And, like I said, to be a trooper, all we ask if you have good moral character. We've all done some bad things when we were younger, growing up. Some of us never got caught for some of the things, but if you can look at all the things on our website and talk to a recruiter. I mean, you may have done some things when you were younger that you may think, oh, they're going to frown upon it. Well, no, you did it when you were younger. We all did stupid things. We were dumb, young and dumb. Yeah. We've aged and gotten better. So, if you think that's something that you want to do is go out and go enforce traffic laws, work traffic crashes, take bad guys and girls off the streets. There's a lot of freedom. It is a fun job. It's what you make of it. You're not stuck behind a desk. Your desk is that patrol car, and you go anywhere you want, in the area that you're assigned. We don't have a briefing in the morning. We get out our front door, get in our car and go to work.
Yeah.
And where your area is, and where the problem areas are, where all the traffic crashes are, and you try to go out there and prevent that and just see what the day brings. Every day is an adventure. Some days are bad, some days are great. If you're mentally strong, to be able to know that you have to work these fatality crashes, that they suck. There's no, it's hard to do. And, because you have compassion for other people, but you got to look at it this way is you get to prevent a lot of that from happening by taking your drunk drivers off the road, slowing down your speeders, getting people to wear that seatbelt. So I like to look at it that way when I'm taking the drunk sitting in my car who's thrown up all over himself. I'm like, man, if I didn't catch him, who would he have killed? Whether he killed himself or somebody else, it affected somebody's life. So that's the way I've always looked at it. Even though you may get out of the jail at 4 or 5 in the morning, by the time you book them in, the sun may be coming up, but it was well worth it because you impacted and possibly saved somebody's life. You impacted his or hers for sure. They may go out and do it again. They may not. But it's all about that moment. Or the times where we catch people running triple digits every day. Wow. It's like, had I not slowed them down from doing 130, what would have happened down the road? Yeah. Whose life did I save? We'll never know. But you like to think that you did, because if we weren't out there, because we stop, I don't know how many cars we stop a year. Got to be nearly 1 million. And the tens of thousands of people that we put behind bars that are, whether they're dangerous drivers, dangerous criminals, that are wanted by the law, that are burglars, rapists, murderers. We find them out there. They all travel by car, and that's what we all got at 4:25 in the morning, the blue alert scared the hell out of a lot of people, and a lot of people were frustrated. We saw all the comments on there. We don't manage that as a highway patrol, but it does come from the state. But what that blue alert was, because the amber alert traditionally come out about 6 in the morning, but that blue alert, and I had a news agency ask me this. They asked, why was it so early? And I was like, well, the shooting happened, and the people said, well, it happened in Hall County. And I had to look where Hall County was. I pulled it up on Google, and it's over in the Panhandle. That shooting where that officer was shot multiple times happened about 11:30. So you got to think somebody desperate who does that, they're going to be on the run. And I looked at my distance from Belton, Texas to there. That was 5 hours later. So he could have been in my area at 4:30 in the morning when that alert came out. So it's a public safety issue. That's why they pushed it out for everybody. Yes, a lot of people are in bed sleeping, but think of all the truckers and people that are out that work night shifts that are stopping at 7-Eleven to get their coffee and may have seen this person. And it takes just that one person to.
Did he get picked up?
Not yet, not as of yet. I tried to see if he was caught yet, so he's still on the loose. So he's somewhere out there. So look at your blue alert. I know a lot of people are frustrated, but it's somebody's life that can be saved because if he's on the run, what's to say if he's willing to shoot a cop multiple times, what's to say he's going to do to you to take your car so he can keep on the run? Yeah. So that's why it was pushed out. It's not to wake everybody up or startle them. That's it made me jump.
That's an important. Important information.
It is. It's an act of somebody who's armed and dangerous.
And not to downplay an Amber Alert, but it's like under an Amber Alert, typically somebody's taking somebody and they're running, right? This Blue Alert, this guy is a potential threat to the entire community.
Exactly. So if this person who gets up at 5 o'clock in the middle of Central Texas or wherever this guy is at, going in to get coffee, and he happened to look, and then when he got up in the morning, sees this guy with the red hair and the beard, and just like, okay, nice to know. And then he goes in the store, he's like, man, that looks like the guy on here. Yeah. He looks at it and calls 911. He may be the person, the hero that gets to put in that call and get this person behind bars and apprehended.
That's right.
So, but yeah, like I said, not everybody's sleeping at night. There's a lot of people that work the night shift, truckers and delivery drivers and other police, EMS, doctors, people going in back and forth, working night shift, nurses. There's a lot of people out there at night. Trust me, at 3 in the morning, the interstate looks like it does at 3 in the afternoon sometimes. I'm always thinking when I'd go out and work some overtime, and then when we come out at 4 in the morning, and here I'm half asleep, getting my coffee, getting woke up, and I get on the interstate. I'm like, man, where are all these people going? They say they're everywhere. They're all over the place. So.
Yeah, no, you're
Big
right.
state, lots of people, but that's what that was about. But yeah, if anyone interested in going into law enforcement, or if you're a current officer somewhere and you want to go to a state agency, just go to TXDPS, scroll down to the bottom to become a state trooper. It asks every question you could possibly answer, and if we don't have it on there, it has a list of recruiters you click on in your area, and you can contact them directly.
Let me ask you something. It's hard to tell who's going to be a good trooper, right? I mean, until they go through the training and until they get involved and they're starting to work, in the community. But somebody who's kind of on the fence thinking this is a job for them, what is a good candidate? Whether it's personality trait, sure, there's physicality to it, but I think I used to work in a jail years ago, and the majority of that job was talking and thinking.
Yeah.
And so what makes a great candidate for law enforcement, but also DPS?
Somebody, for one, just the general love for people, all people, and that's the thing is. I enjoy people. I enjoy talking. I was always the kid in trouble at school and elementary school, get kicked out in the hallway for talking because I couldn't shut up. Now I get to talk for a living for DPS, being the spokesperson. But prior to that, for 22 years, I was on the road. And, everybody out there that's up and down the road is somebody's family member. Yeah. Whether they have a big family, little family, somebody in that car, someone cares for that person, you would hope. Yeah. I don't think there's one person out there that not one person cares about them. Even if they're a no good person, surely their mom or grandma somewhere loved them, especially when they were a little kid. But everybody has a family, and even though that was the hardest thing about this job is when you work a fatality crash, seeing these people laying there and you're covering them with the sheets and investigating the crash and getting their ID out of their purse or their pocket. Knowing this address you're fixing to go to, that their loved ones back home have no idea. And that's what's heartbreaking. It's like, damn, I'm fixing to have to ruin these people's lives. But that's something I can never get used to, and you shouldn't get used to it, because if you get used to telling other people the family member is dead, then there's something wrong with you, because you watch them just collapse and it ruins their life. But you also, like I said, you're out there slowing people down, and we don't always write tickets. I mean, there's some cops out there that like to write tickets for, I say, violations that I normally wouldn't. I like people to get in touch with people, like if for a headlight or a tail light out. Sometimes people don't know that. If you're driving the car, it's hard to tell. But a courtesy stop, letting them know, that it's out, that it could be a safety issue, and let them know, get that fixed. Here's a warning going your way. But just to talk to people in general, because they're never happy to get stopped. I mean, I've been stopped even as a trooper. I've been stopped for minor traffic violation. I'm like, what am I getting stopped for? I ain't speeding. You know, there was my license plate light was out of my other truck, and I'm like, man, that's embarrassing. But you know, they're never thrilled to see you, but to make their day a little better by saying, hey, you know, being friendly, writing their warning or ticket, whatever, and I always say thank you. And like I said, in 22 years on the road, I've never gotten a complaint. Really, I haven't. You know, they may not have been people happy with me, especially when I've taken them to jail, or even we've been in a bloody fight and busted up my hands, but it's because they were fighting. They don't complain if you treat them right. But yeah, just characteristics of, you know, being outdoors. That's one. You're working in all kinds of weather: rain, sleet, snow, heat, extreme heat. Of course, here in Texas, but just being part of your community, which your community is the whole state of Texas, because you work all over the place. Sometimes they send you here, sometimes they send you there. But just being an ambassador for the state of Texas, we are the best state in the union. We really are. Yeah. Get to wear a cowboy hat. Who wouldn't, right? I've worn one my whole life, and now I get paid to wear one. So.
Well, you know what's awesome about it is it seems like the type of job, like you mentioned, you know, you have some freedom in how you work and how you structure your day. You work an area and you've got certain things to do, and it's a heavy job at times, but you know, being able to communicate to people and maybe get through to them, you know, instead of writing a ticket, we're gonna have a conversation.
There's been times, and I've stopped people and their attitude was so bad and they were just having a bad day. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what just happened. They may have just been going through a divorce. They may have just gotten fired. They may have just lost somebody, a loved one. And then you come along, you're like, oh crap, now my day's even worse. So they're already pissed off. Yeah. And now they're barking at you, this and that. And there's times where I've talked to people 20, 30 minutes just to talk them down, just say, hey man, just, you know, are you okay? Just ask them, you okay? Is everything all right? I mean, I'm not a counselor, but I deal with a lot of stuff, and I've got my own problems too, because behind this uniform, I've had some personal experiences that suck. Yeah. Let's talk about it. And I've watched them go from irate to angry to calm, and then thanking me, shaking my hand, or even giving me a hug, you know, and when it was done, because you treat them like a human being that they are. You know, they're not just a traffic stop ticket number and send on their way. You let them, people forget that when they see us, they think, oh, look, everything's perfect in their life. They're a DPS trooper. They have no problems. I'll tell you, they could write a book about my life. Some of the things that have happened to me tragically in my past. Sure. It's like, holy cow, moments that I'll tell you off the air. Yeah. But yeah, it's, you know, I can relate because, you know, the way I grew up is, you know, I talked off the air. I grew up in Killeen, Texas. I grew up with every culture you could think of. We were all right there. And so talking to different cultures and people, I know how I can kind of relate because I've been there. I've grew up with them. Yeah. And, you know, just to see society as a whole, and you want everybody's out there. And that's the thing as a trooper, when you're out there stopping cars, and when I was training people, training new troopers, I always said, hey, remember, 98% of these people you're dealing with are pretty good, generally good people. They're not scumbags, they're not criminals, but there's that 2% that'll kill you just for walking up to the car because they're on the run for something. They did something bad. I said, so remember that. They're just going to work. They're going to football game. They're going to visit family, just like you do when you're off. And just think about when you're up and down the road, if you happen to have been going a little fast and or something, you had to tail out or whatever, and get stopped for something, or you forgot your registration was out 2-3 weeks. You're like, oh crap, I didn't even notice it. Because how many people out there listening can know when their registration goes on their car or truck right now? Yeah. None. I know when mine is because mine's brand new and done 2 years from August. But other than that, I'm like, man, I have no idea. I better go look. Yeah. So sometimes it's an issue that they just never look, and we give them friendly warnings that, hey, get this taken care of and get on your way. But yeah, it's like I said, you got your community to take care of. You know, we like to protect everybody that's out there, no matter what their background is, what their beliefs, religion. We don't care. You know, they're Texans, and it sounds cliche, but that's what we do. Yeah, that's why we go. Now, if you get in this line of work because you were bullied in school and you want to get people back one at a time, that ain't going to work.
It's not a good idea.
No. Get in it for the right reasons. Right. I mean, and now we got our pay up there pretty substantial compared to when I started nearly 20 years ago. You're able to make a comfortable living. You're not going to get rich. Man, some of these houses I've seen out here on these mountains they built, beautiful. My jaw dropping driving in. I was looking at this house.
That's probably this guy here.
Is it?
Yeah, he builds a lot of them.
Man, there's some massive houses. I said, look at that house. I was like, it's a little out of a highway patrol budget, but man, it's you could definitely make a decent living. But it is a very rewarding job. You meet and see lots of people, and if that's what you like to do is interact with folks, come on, let's go.
Well, it's very rewarding.
It is.
It really is. And when it comes to law enforcement, the places that I've been and working at the jail, state trooper was the man. You know, you had your county, you had your local, and but everybody got out of the way when DPS showed up.
And that's what I looked at when I was a city cop. I looked at these troopers. I was like, man, I want to be a trooper because that's what I want to do my whole life. And I didn't get hired the first time, but I ended up working for some other good departments. And I'm finally at 28. I said, man, I need to do it. I need to reapply because I got comfortable where I was at, enjoyed the department where I was at in Stephenville, great department, but I wasn't doing what I wanted to do my whole life. And it's the best choice I ever made. It was scary going in because they said, we don't know where we're going. We're going to be somewhere in the state of Texas. They try to get it now where you could try to pick where you want to go, what regions you want to go to, make it easier for those that have family. Because I had a wife and a kid at the time when I went through. I had no idea where I was going to go until 2 weeks before I graduated. And I didn't care. I said, you know what, throw it out to the wind and it'll all fall in the right places. And it has. But yeah, here I'm looking at the 3 to 6 years from now, I'll be retiring.
That's awesome.
And with God willing, anything could happen. Sure. So I just thankful, very grateful to be able to do what I do for DPS now. And, I wouldn't trade it for my experiences for nothing. So it's been quite a ride, and it's not over yet. I interact with so many people now, being the spokesperson and traveling. I mean, I've traveled the country in the last couple of years since I've seen you. And, we have these competitions we do with other state agencies.
I've seen you on the DPS Instagram.
Yeah. And it's who'd have thought I'd have won twice, first place 2 years in a row. Awesome. I didn't even know what a power pole was when 6 years ago, and now we build these safety programs and we compete against these other state agencies. And then it's a friendly competition, but when we're done, we take their materials and we give them ours on a thumb drive. We swap it all out. So their job is for the safety education to go out. And they go out to the schools and to these big civic events and they teach them, we share each other's programs. We just kind of modify them, like take their state seals and stuff and put ours in. But it's all the same goal, and that's public safety. It's usually dealing with speeding, DWIs, seatbelts, and they come up with these creative ways because you don't just want to kill people with the same PowerPoint. You have a lot of videos and cool graphics that really...
Well, you lose their attention when you...
Yeah, after 4 or 5 minutes, you don't. So it's a lot of videos, really cool interactions. It's the way you present it, especially to high school kids, and I love going to the high school kids, talking in front of 2,000 of them, and they're like, oh gosh, some trooper, and I have some of the coolest videos up there. And next you know, they're taking their heads out of their cell phones, starting to watch me.
Yeah.
And and we talk about, and I tell them about my experiences. I tell them about the dumb things I did when I was a kid, so they could relate that, this trooper up there was once sitting in this side listening to the other. I remember when TABC came to my high school, and we're like, yeah, right, we're going to be drinking this weekend. We'll be hiding from you, and we did. But, we bring back the human element to it that, people forget that this uniform behind it, there's a man or woman that done the same crap you did when you were younger.
Yeah.
We did, just didn't get caught for some of it. But we lived our life.
It's funny, when after I'd left the jail, I went to a job interview and they asked me 2 questions. They said, what did you hate about the jail and what did you like about the jail? And I said, the thing I hated about the jail was when things went bad, I had to deal with them. I said, the thing that I loved about the jail was that when things went bad, I had to deal with them. I said, so it really depended on the day.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those things where it's just, and same thing just in law enforcement in general, regardless of the day you're having, you still have to do your job.
Exactly.
But if you can come into it with a good mentality, and like you
attitude,
said,
that's it.
You approach everybody differently. Everybody's fresh. You don't bring your last stop to your next stop type of thing. You really can make an impact on people's lives.
You can. You really can. Yeah. And then I remember when I was a city cop in Stephenville, I worked for this place called ERATH Excels. It's where a lot of the kids who've been in a lot of trouble, they would go and get their education. And a lot of these kids, we dealt with their parents putting them in jail. So we saw why they were there because they were, but no one there to really raise them. So it was like a charter school. It kind of accelerated them through, get their diploma so they can kind of make something of their life. And I remember I was doing a security gig at a wedding like 15 years ago as a trooper up where I was at in Glen Rose, and they hired, because they have to have 2 officers there because they're serving alcohol. All of a sudden I hear, Washko, and I look over and the chef is coming at me. I'm like, what the hell? Who is this guy? I don't know him. Well, he came up to me, shook my hand, goes, you don't remember me, do you? And I remember him growing up now, but he was younger. And it was from that school. He said, man, I just want to thank you because of you. I turned my life around because you guys, you talked to us when you would come in there, and I'd work on my days off in there. They would pay us, and I'd be interacting with the kids the whole time, and I'm in uniform basically to keep them to behave, keep them from misbehaving. And he said, yeah, he goes, my parents were in jail. You told me that there's opportunities out there. You believed in us, and here I am. He had a catering company. Really? And he was doing all the food, and I was like, man, look at you go. And that was pretty cool. Yeah. And for him to acknowledge me, I was just being nice, doing my job, because they're kids that had the same opportunities I did, which I grew up, like I said, in a military family. It was in Killeen, Texas. It was just a bunch of kids, and we didn't know where we were going to end up, because a lot of those kids, they weren't from Killeen. They just went off on their own, depends on if their parents were going to transfer, the military is going to take them elsewhere. But, we all get the same opportunity. Some have it harder than others. Some have it easier than others. I'll admit that. Mine was kind of rough. My brother and I, people always say my brother's a retired lieutenant colonel and I do what I do, and my other younger brother's still in the Navy. And friends that we grew up with, they said, man, we thought all of y'all were destined for failure because we grew up in a rough home. Yeah. We did. And it was just my dad raising us and my grandpa. It was not pretty. It was bad. It was real bad, but we, against all odds, we all made something of ourselves, and because we knew we had to. Yeah. And that was that. So
there's something to be said for being raised a little rough. It exposes,
makes you who you are. It does. You're exposed to the world. The world sucks, especially, and if you don't have money or a job lined up, and I've known some people that never had to worry about money in their life, but if you've been at the bottom and had nothing and worked your way up, it makes it a whole lot sweeter. It really does. Yeah. Because you appreciate the things you have.
Well, when you put it like that, when you talk about being at the bottom and working your way up, as opposed to starting at a higher level, let's say, that exposes you to so much of life, and so you see what it's like to be in a crap situation, and you see what it's like to be successful, and so when you interact with people, you're able to recognize where they're at a little quicker.
And not to negate against people who, young men and women coming up that go into the parents' companies and they've been millionaires their whole life. That's not their fault. Right. They're just fortunate. But knowing that, all right, it's 8 days till payday. McDonald's still has 89-cent cheeseburgers back then, or ramen noodles. That's going to be the meal for the next 9 days. That's the way I lived. That's the way a lot of people I know lived. Yeah. It's like, man, payday's a long way away, or it's bologna, and it's crap food. But it's kept me driven my whole life. I've been working since I was 11 years old, and I've always had goals. My first goal was to get money to buy a truck when I was 16. Yeah. And and then as you get older, you start looking at what you want to do for a living to support yourself and have a cool job. And this was the cool job I wanted. And like I said, I didn't get it the first shot. I got denied, and then ended up working at Killeen Police Department, and then in Stephenville. And, and I enjoyed being a city cop. There's nothing wrong with it. It was great. I loved the city. I loved the people in it, but I wanted to wear this. I wanted to be a trooper, and I almost gave up. And I thought, man, I'm 28 now. I've been doing this for 7 years as a cop. Yeah. It's going by fast. I can't apply when I'm 30, 35, 40, because I'll be too old to go through that academy. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go for it. And I did it. And I'm very fortunate that I did. But, going into DPS, 7 years with city experience where I've been to murder scenes, sexual assault scenes, family violence scenes almost daily. We had domestic calls all the time. If you go in straight as a trooper, you're not really going to deal with that unless you're in a smaller area and you're back up to like a small department that has 1 or 2 officers. You go back them up. But there's a lot of troopers out there that this was their first police job. They'd never been to a domestic violence call. They've never had to fight an out-of-control 15, 16-year-old teenager in the bedroom because parents couldn't handle him or her. And going into people's homes that way. And a lot of the suicide calls, man, I've been to so many suicide calls, and I talked about this to somebody the other day. I've been to some where people, they live in a rat hole, drugs and this and that. But then I've been to some, I look at the walls. I mean, houses built nice like this, big trucks, horse barns, millionaire. Why would they do that? They had it all. Family pictures on the wall, but you never know. Yeah. You never know what goes on in somebody's brain when they're having mental issues or drug problems. And I've seen the drug problems tear entire families apart, especially in the early 2000s when meth started getting really big. Up there in Stephenville, and we've seen prominent people had prominent jobs lose their whole families, careers, everything to the dope and the meth, and it's like, damn, that's sad. Yeah. So going into that prior to DPS, like I said, I think I was put on this path not by my own choice, but because this is where I was meant to be, and seeing the things I've seen and the things I've dealt with through all these people's homes I've been in over the years that were usually for bad reasons. I mean, no one calls the cops to visit; they call for bad reasons, and it's like, man, it kind of makes you be able to prepare for that person on the stop. You have no idea, but judging with the car, what's going on in that driver's head or that passenger's head, or what they just dealt with, because everybody's got a story. No one's life is perfect. Everybody going up and down the highway has fears, stresses, relationship problems. Happy days, bad days, money problems. I mean, everybody's still, it's always, things are getting tougher economically. I mean, fortunately, the price of gas is low right now, and I found out why. They say it's because it's election year. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, but look at the Middle East, and when this war kicks off, which it is, they say gas is fixing to do some nasty things, and the price is fixing to skyrocket. I hope not, but maybe that's more reason why we should rely on our own oil and not somebody else's. Yeah. No, it's my opinion. It's a lot of people's opinions.
Well, I think one thing that people need to keep in mind, and when they go into any sort of law enforcement, is, you always hear, and you see it on some cars, but you hear in TV shows and stuff, but the protect and serve portion. But law enforcement really is a life of service to other people, and I think that. I had a conversation with some ladies last night, and they talked about being in service to folks. They ran a hospice facility, and there's so many. One of them had something in mind of how she wanted to be of service to other people, and it didn't go that way, but it ended up going another route. Yeah. And it's like, if you're the type of person that your heart is in providing service to others, I mean, this is another avenue, and to me, this is probably one of the biggest avenues. Your interaction with people is so short, but you can make a huge impact in just in a traffic stop. The
little kid in the back seat, I hand a little sticker to her, we have these little squishy highway patrol cars, handing that to them. If he's 8, 9, 10, 11, hell, that's the age I was when I wanted to do that. So I may have made his decision to be a trooper one day. But also I tell the young troops that I train when I was a training officer that remember to have friends outside of law enforcement. Yeah. Because when we're young cops, and I know my son's going through right now. He's 23. I'm sure he's probably got the radio on all day. Can't wait to get his day off till we can go back to work to get into some more crap because it's fun. Yeah, it is. But also, separate that. I used to have the radio on, listen to it on my day off. Man, I can't wait to go back to work. They're getting into all kinds of crap without me. No, those days are long gone. They went by fast. But I tell people, make sure it's nothing wrong with having friends as cops but you got to remember to. The young cops, all they want to talk about is police stuff. Sure. Yeah, we had this call the other day, and you never get away from it. Yeah. Have your other friends, your construction workers, anybody, anything other than law enforcement that you're not talking about the same crap every day. You got to get it out of your head and have some peace, and then get ready to go back to work and do it all over again. Yeah. So that's a good thing. A lot of my friends are in the civilian world, and like the guys I rope with, and ain't a damn cop in them, but any of them but me. So and it's a good thing. I have home builders. Some guys are in the pest control business. There's just and that's my outlet. Just get on that horse and rope, and we do that a couple times a week. That's really taken off in the last few months. I've rekindled the friendship from a guy I'd known for 30 years. We used to rodeo together, and turns out he lives around the corner, and try to keep my horse, and we got steers now, and we roping all the time. So
it's awesome.
It's a good stress reliever. It's hard as hell, but I'm getting better every day.
Bryan, anything else you want to share with folks?
No, man. Just like I said, like we talked about the community. Be involved in your community, even if it's just your neighbor on each side of your house. If you do that, talk to them. Just be friendly. Just don't just shut your door and wave. And it's we're living in a different time than you and I were teenagers and younger. I think this generation needs to get their heads out of the phones and start talking to each other again, because that's a big thing. We've noticed when we were in high school, we'd sit and park our trucks and talk. These kids now go somewhere in the public, their backs are to each other, and they're talking on the phones.
Yeah.
They don't know how to interact anymore, and I think that's really scary, because you talk to a young person, they can't even make eye contact with you because it's awkward for them.
Yeah.
Because they're not used to it. They're used to dealing with these phones, and it's no fault of their own, other than that's how technology has grown, and they're so convenient. It's so awesome. We could look at, remember Encyclopedia Britannica?
Yeah.
We had to look something up. Well, now everything, and that's what I tell my mom. She's in Germany, and she's like, what is this, that? I said, Mom, remember, anything you could put in the internet and it'll have an answer, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
It's in there. And she's like, I know I'm old, I forget. And she'll look it up, and it's all right there. But no, it's all about just getting back with taking care of the people around you. And, they may fall in hard times, and you'd want your neighbor to help you out. And look at the people, what happened over at this hurricane in Tennessee and North Carolina. It's a good example of what good can come out of a tragedy, when you see all these people stepping in and saying, we're not waiting on the government, we're going to fix this now. Yeah. We're going to help these people now because they need it now. I mean, people are dying by the minute because there's still people they haven't found.
Sure.
And unfortunately, that number's going to grow, but they may find that you get these great stories of these survivors that, they drank creek water and survived. Because you could survive on just water alone for 30 days without food, but you can only survive 7 days without water. Yeah. So, as much as we love to eat, we could do it if we had to.
Yeah, if you had to.
But it's very scary what's going on. Our hearts go out to them, and hopefully a lot of lives will get saved to get this mess cleaned up and start rebuilding over there. It can happen anywhere.
Yes, sir. Well, outstanding, Bryan. I appreciate you coming out.
And let's not make it 2 years. Let's shoot for next year. Let's just do this once a year, or maybe a couple times a year.
Hey, man, when
we'll
you come to San Antonio, holler at me.
All right, we'll do.
We need to do some podcasting on some rodeo stuff too. So
definitely. I'd like to do that.
So that'd be awesome.
Cool.
Appreciate you, Bryan.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Gabe Molina Podcast.